Please be upstanding for Her Worshipful the Mayor and Deputy Mayor.
Good evening, everyone. Please sit down. Welcome to the meeting of the Council. My name is Councillor Beth Rowland. I am the Mayor of Wokingham and will chair this meeting. Before we start, I would like to go through a few preliminaries. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. A reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. May I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timing set out in the Constitution. I would like to remind members to be mindful to speak directly into their microphones when speaking. If members turn away from the microphone, the sound will not be picked up for the online attendees and we will struggle to hear the chamber. Are there any apologies?
There are 3 apologies. Councillor David Davis, Councillor Wayne Smith and Councillor John Halsall.
Item 37. May I sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of July as a correct record? These can be found in the supplementary paper. May I have a show of hands, please? Is that a majority? As there is a majority, the minutes are agreed. Thank you. May I also sign the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 24th of July as a correct record? Please, again, may I have a show of hands? Thank you. As there is a majority, the minutes are agreed and I will sign them. Are there any declarations of interest? Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to declare an interest in relation to item 52 of the agenda, as I'm a director of Loddon Homes and Wokingham Borough Council Holdings.
Thank you. Al Neil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On agenda item 54, the motion about ultra low emission zones, for the record, I need to declare that I own a non-ULEZ compliant motorcycle.
Mike Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Neil, I also own a non-ULEZ motor vehicle, so I declare an interest in item 54.
David Cornish.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must declare an interest in agenda item 52 as a non-exec director of Loddon Homes Limited and WBC Holdings Limited.
Thank you. Prue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm declaring interest also in item 52 as a non-executive director of Berrybrook Homes of Wokingham Housing Limited and Holdings Company. Thank you.
Thank you, Prue. Lindsay.
Yes, I have to give a potential declaration of interest on agenda item 54 because I own a near 15-year-old Saab and I've got absolutely no idea whether it is ULEZ or ULEZ not compliant, and I believe the proposer of the motion has also got a similar age vehicle. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I ask for guidance from the officers about declaring old cars and motorcycles on that item? My understanding is that if members
are no worse or better affected than the majority of the population in the borough. They don't have to declare an interest, and I think this is superfluous declaration of interests.
Okay, the advice is that you don't need to declare an interest. You're not affected. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. No one else any declarations of interest that are of interest? Okay, it's my turn just to say a few words now. And I would like to talk about just one special occasion that I've experienced as mayor, and that was at last month's citizenship ceremony. The citizenship ceremonies are always a delight. They're very humbling and they're very emotional. But last month's was more emotional than most. And it was because there was a child going into year 7 from year 6 from one of our schools who is appearing on stage in the West End in a musical. He was an absolute delight. You would have thought he was probably about 35. He spoke fluently, with confidence, intelligently, and I really would have loved to have hugged him because he was such a delight to have a conversation with. So there are real pleasures in being mayor, and I'm sure others have experienced them too. But I'm very proud of our schools, our schools that have produced children that have got the ability to do that sort of thing, and then sing and dance on the stage. What a wonderful thing. Let's go on to public question times now. Oh, Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before we do go on to the next item on the agenda, I wonder whether I may, with your indulgence, just say a few words. Members may not know that this is the last meeting of full council that's going to be attended by Callum Wernham. I want, therefore, on behalf of the council, to thank him for his service and the great help he's given many of us over the years. Callum first joined the council in 2017, and after a brief spell with finance, very understandable, it was only brief, moved to democratic services. During his time with us, he's looked after numerous committees and task and finish groups, as well as home to school transport and education appeals, and he's organised no end of individual executive member decisions. And that has apparently it's sometimes been quite challenging because individual executive members have forgotten that they're supposed to be making those decisions. And Callum has come to the rescue and reminded them. I've known him most for his excellent work on the planning committee, which I sat on for a very long time until very recently. I think that's surely one of the most challenging of all committees to summarise what's actually happened. Yet month after month, Callum produced the most impressive sets of minutes that perfectly captured the contributions of the different participants. And we even got called by our first names quite often, which was very endearing. So Callum, I'm sure all councillors will join me in wishing you great good fortune in your new role and thanking you very warmly for all you've done for us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And Callum, we will miss you, seriously miss you, because you're very good at technical things. And we'll say no more. We go on now to public question times. We have 30 minutes. I'd like to remind exec members that responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and we are timing them. We have 3 public questions. The first is from Paul Stevens. Paul, please will you stand and put your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question's for the Executive Member for Climate Emergency and Resident Services. In a recent bulletin, Wokingham Borough Council on fighting climate change made much of the impact food miles have on our carbon footprint. I quote, "If you're looking for inspiration on how to reduce your food miles and lower your carbon footprint, look at these top sustainable tips. Choose food with fewer food miles, grow your own fruit, vegetables and herbs, share surplus food with friends, family and local community, shop locally, use refill shops to prevent plastic waste, only buy what you need to prevent food waste, and turn leftover food into compost. Have the council also considered encouraging local farmers to grow local food on local farmland to be sold then to local residents?"
Thank you for your question, Paul. We acknowledge the significant impact that global mass production and consumption of food have on climate change and ecological systems. We also acknowledge the unprecedented pressure on our local land to balance the demand for new homes and infrastructure with the need to make green spaces available to our community. We don't directly liaise with farmers to encourage them to grow food on the borough's land and sell it to local residents, but as you'll be aware, some already do. As a semi-rural local authority, we recognise the importance of growing food locally. This has positive implications on individuals and communities, including supporting the local economy, improving people's health and well-being, reducing food waste and protecting biodiversity. For this reason, the council runs initiatives to support local food production, including providing allotments to our residents, funded through Section 106 developer contributions. In the past 4 years, Wokingham has had several new allotment facilities added, which new and existing residents have access to. Sites on Binfield Road, Mulberry Grove, Penny Grove, Shinfield Orchard Rise and Ifford Crescent include over 130 plots, providing residents with the opportunity to grow their own food on local land, benefiting them as well as their friends and family. Some allotments are also provided with the compost toilets and solar power electricity, allowing residents to spend more time at the allotment. There are local markets and food shops around the borough where local farmers can and do sell their produce, thus providing residents as well as visitors with fresh produce that has a low carbon impact while supporting the local economy.
Paul, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Given the imminent publication of the local plan in November, has it also occurred to council to stop encouraging big owners of farmland, such as the University of Reading, to stop them from selling off their farmland to housing developers and instead encourage them to engage in what would seem to me to be their primary purpose, i.e. education and research into better farming and food production methods? Thank you.
Thank you for supplementary, Paul. Given that this relates to the local plan, it would put me in a very difficult position to say anything on this because I cannot predetermine any judgment on that local plan until it comes to full council for debate. So I'm going to have to decline to give a detailed answer on that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Sarah. Our second question comes from Tony Johnson. Tony, would you please ask your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask the question standing in my name, please.
Thank you, Tony. That is a big question with the amount of time that I've got to reply with, but here goes. The Borough strategy for its treasury management functions, which includes investments, loans and borrowing, are reported and agreed by all councillors annually at the February council meeting. This report details the proposed approach, various prudential indicators such as the level of borrowing and our investment strategy. These approaches are set with appropriate guidances and regulations from the Prudential Code provided by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountancy, CIPFA, and are set to ensure that they are affordable, prudent and sustainable, as well as ensuring that the Treasury management decisions are taken in accordance with good professional practice. This strategy is set alongside the capital strategy and the medium-term financial plan, a mid-year report and outturn report. Also, they are reported throughout the committee system during the financial year. Further governance, such as reporting and approval levels, are detailed in the Council's constitution and financial regulations, which are then embedded operationally throughout processes and controls within the financial team. These functions and their activity are audited both internally and externally, and as part of the audit of the end-of-year accounts. All financial transactions and accounting are also required to meet regulations and processes set by the Financial Conduct Authority. I can reassure you that the team undertaking these roles and actions have appropriate training and management support, and we believe through internal controls and through external governance that the strategy and operations are robust and support the financial stability of this council. Thank you.
Tony, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, I do. Before anyone starts thinking that this administration is in power but not in control, please would you provide a written public explanation into who, how, why and when Wokingham came to loan £10 million to a neighbouring council which had declared itself bankrupt by issuing an S114 notice, with focus on the risk assessment at the time and the risk assessment today, given the Prime Minister's statement last week that he would not be bailing out councils following the bankruptcy of Birmingham.
Thank you, Tony. Well, the fact is that Woking is not bankrupt. It's just a term that they use because councils, as you know, are underwritten by the government in all of their transactions. So we have commitment from Woking to say that they will honour our debt of 10 million and plus the interest that will come back with it. And I'm going to talk about it later on, actually. But as for Birmingham, well, I don't know about Birmingham. That's what they want to do with Birmingham. But certainly with Woking, we've had reassurance that we will get paid. So
the third and final question is from Jim Fruin. Jim, please, will you put your question?
Thank you. During the January 2023 full council meeting, the executive member for Climate, Emergency and Resident Services made a statement to this chamber highlighting the issue of poor behaviours by councillors. The statement included poor behaviour by councillors, plural, towards officers, and stated that robust discussions are perfectly possible without descending into bullying and harassment. Can she please provide an update on what actions have been taken to prevent such poor behaviour?
Thank you, Jim, for your question. All councillors, when elected, sign up to the Member Code of Conduct, which sets out our legal responsibilities and the high standards of conduct and behaviour that the public officers and our fellow councillors quite rightly expect of us. In Wokingham Borough, we have a clear process for dealing with any formal complaints we receive. This process is in line with best practice, and indeed our Member Code of Conduct replicates the model code promoted by the Local Government Association. At each meeting of our Standards Committee, members receive updates on the outcome of any complaints, scrutinise any patterns or trends, and recommend and promote training to all members in the application of the code. My original statement in January was made because, in my opinion, there were some individual councillors who were dangerously close to not meeting expected standards of behaviour. Much better to nip it in the bud than have the formal standards processes to go through. After all, prevention is the best cure. But I never singled out any specific councillors, and the statement was made as a general one. The statement was simply a reminder to all councillors that we have a behaviour standard to meet.
Thank you. Jim, do you have a supplementary?
Please. Thank you. But I know, like myself, you've been subject to some of these poor behaviours, so I know this means a lot to you. My supplementary is, what process and policy safeguards are in place to protect councillors and members of the public from such poor behaviours that, as you described, can descend into bullying and harassment?
That's a really good question, Jim. I don't know the answer. I'm going to ask to get a written response to you, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public questions. We now come on to petitions. Does anyone wish to submit a petition? Okay, thank you. Pauline?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking tonight to present the petition signed by over 1,800 local residents calling for the Borough Council ruling Liberal Democrat group to think again about their plans to remove 170 litter bins. This change has already caused chaos and additional expense because it was implemented and trumpeted by the Lib Dem exec member without any consultation or proper decision making. Local residents are asking you to listen. They know that if you remove bins, they'll be treated to the view of dog poo bags hanging from trees and litter on the streets, and that the council will then have more work to clean the place up. Residents want to have bins in play areas so they can teach their children not to drop litter. The savings aligned to removing litter bins may be non-existent if the cost of clearing up is factored in. If the council have enough cash to waste on having officers work up a plan to implement street parking charges, whilst claiming in the newspaper today that they've got no plans to implement, them, then they surely should have enough money to save our litter bins. Savings.
A petition from Ian Spurrier, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm here today to present my petition to include a link into the Wokingham to Crowthorne bus service between Crowthorne Village and the Crowthorne Station area at the west end of Duke's Ride. As these areas are mostly within Bracknell Forest, it may seem inappropriate that I'm presenting this to Wokingham Borough, especially as only 17 of the 405 signatories chose living in Wokingham on the petition. However, I and many others who consider ourselves to live in Crowthorne are Wokingham Borough taxpayers who live near Crowthorne Station in the Finch Hampstead and Wokingham Without parishes within a few yards of the border with Crowthorne Parish in Bracknell Forest, and would have chosen living in Crowthorne, although technically we are in Wokingham. Also, the bus routes serving that area are run by Thames Valley Buses. I don't know the exact relationship between Wokingham Borough and Thames Valley Buses, so without prejudice, I may use the word partnership. And I'm informed that your partnership has some bearing on the service they provide. There used to be a service down Duke's Ride to the station end, but this was discontinued several years ago as the bus company claimed there was an average of one passenger a week and it was not sustainable. This claim is disputed by many of the signatories who have lived there for many years and who used it. There is an increasing population with a wide variation of demographic at the west end of Duke's Ride. The elderly, young parents with small children, train travellers, as well as those who can't drive or who would prefer not to for environmental or cost reasons. This need will increase dramatically if the planned development of over 200 dwellings on Derby Field goes ahead. It is a mile to walk from the station to Crowthorne Village, and the nearest bus stop is on Lower Wokingham Road, a good 20-minute walk even for a fit person. Many of these people want to travel to Crowthorne Village, Wokingham Tesco or Central Wokingham without the walk from either train station, perhaps laden with shopping, as well as Crowthorne Village residents wanting to access the station or businesses in that area, bringing a benefit to retail and hospitality outlets in both places. I met yesterday with councillors from Bracknell Forest and Crowthorne Parish Councils who both support the need for this service, and they encourage cooperation, in particular concerning cross-border transport planning between themselves and Wokingham Borough at the top level. I hope you can use this petition in your partnership with the bus company to prove to them that there is a need for this service in accordance with your vision of keeping the borough moving. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Please, will you give your petition to Democratic Services? Priya is behind you. Thank you. Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I should like to submit a petition from residents of Hurst Road in Twyford, asking the council to do all it can to reduce the speed of traffic on that road. The petition is the work of a resident, Mrs. Charlie Blankley, who has asked me to present it to you tonight. It takes a slightly unconventional form, but I trust it can be accepted as a genuine expression of the wishes of the signatories. I'll bring it clearer if I can.
We now go on to item 42 on the agenda, which is modernising the tenant customer experience.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry.
Gary's got a petition.
Gary, have you a petition? Yes. Thank you. Would you like to talk to it?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Church Lane is an unlit, unpaved, winding country lane. It is designated as countryside and is also part of the Greenway route, Green Route A, which should be prioritised for non-motorised vehicles, walkers, cyclists and horse riders. For too long, the road has been unsuitable for the volume, type and speed of vehicles using it. Residents are afraid to walk on the lane or to drive out onto the lane for fear of being hit by a car or HGV. All believe a serious accident will occur. While traffic has been reduced on the main roads into Arborfield Cross, the winding country lane has been made the fastest route between Mole Road and Reading Road, even being indicated as such on sat-nav systems. The traffic has significantly increased, including trade and HGVs way in excess of the 7.5-ton weight limit. Traffic measurements taken in November last year recorded 1,500 transits per day. That is over 500,000 transits a year, and traffic modelling forecasts say that this will double by 2026 to over 1 million transits per day on a narrow winding country lane, barely suitable for two-way traffic with church parking and horse stables. Over 3/4 of the residents have signed the petition. The only reason it's not more is because they were not in when the petitioners went to see them. That the road should be closed to traffic, enforced by a physical restriction, and with a design designated turning area. The solution will not adversely impact the benefits that have been brought on Eversley and Swallowfield roads, as the majority of through traffic is driving from Winnersh to Reading or vice versa. And the petitioners ask, will the council consider and act positively on this request? Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, would you like to give your petition for Priya? She's coming down for it. We're now going to move on to item 42, the Tenants Charter. I'd like to welcome a warm welcome to Steve Bowers, who we've seen several times before. Steve will be presenting this item. As many members know, Steve is a tenant volunteer as well as the chairperson of the Tenant and Landlord Improvement Panel. Steve, you have 10 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. I've got 4 or 5 important things to say to you tonight. One of them very important things is that Strictly Come Dancing starts on Saturday, and I hope we're all going to watch it. Yeah? No? Right. Okay, well, that's the important one out of the way. So you've had all the paperwork. I'm not proposing to go through everything bit by bit. You've got slides going through. There's 18 slides up there telling you what we've done, where we've been, how things are going. So please keep your eye on them. One of the first ones, we've got 10 aspirations on our charter. We decided that this year we'd probably enhance 3 of those. One is the stigma of social housing, which unfortunately is out there. We try and break that down. I know you guys throughout the council always are trying to break that down. We want to try and do a better job. As an involved tenant, we get it both ways. We get told off for being in cahoots with the council, and that way, and then it just carries on from there, really. So we get a stigma from one way or the other. We're trying to work with the council to help tenants, and tenants frown on us for being that. And obviously we've got the stigma, which is an everyday thing for tenants. It's a terrible thing you think it's not out there, but it is. So you've seen it in the paperwork. The other one was communication. The communication side of things is always, well, it's a major part of what all we do is communicating to the tenants and everybody what we do within tenant involvement. So it's paramount that we get that right. Kim, who sits alongside me, we work very closely together and doing that. And the Tenant and Landlord Improvement Panel has a lot of communication going out, and it has to be right. I'll say some thank yous in a minute, but we've got some new people on board. George, who is sitting behind me, we've got Rianne in post now. We're lucky to have them guys. They're going to be a mainstay of what's going on. So the communication for us is a big thing. As I say, you've been through the paperwork. I'm not going to enhance all that. And now I'm going to have a prompt from Kim. What was it, Kim?
Modernising tenant engagement.
Modernising tenant engagement. We're trying to find every which way we can to modernise tenant engagement. We've just we've got a social media apprentice on board now. She's pumping it out there with everything we can do. You've seen your little POM. Have everybody got one of them? Have you seen it all? We follow this, we take this around wherever you go, and it's surprising how many people follow what POM's doing. So that's why we do it. We've got lots of communication stuff out there with the groups. We've rehashed our groups, we've put them all together, we've got them under different colours now, so we know exactly where we're going and what we're doing. And we're enhancing it that way. So those are the communication side of things. All the other stuff is up on the list. So we have the Decent Homes now is running just under 100% at this present time. The rent roll is at 101%. And somebody's going to ask me, why is it 101%? Because it is, and we're collecting more than is normal rents. So, and we are at our rent roll debt is at 2.26. Yeah. So we've got a target by 2024-25 to get that down to 2 points. So we're well on target for that, and it proves that the tenants in Wokingham have the culture to pay their debts, their rents and stuff. So we're getting there, which is a great thing. So that was rents. Decent Homes, as I say. We've got gas servicing coming up. Gas servicing is at 100% and has been for 5 years now, which is a great thing to do. We have a certain amount of things audited every year. And we have a certain amount of audits going out there. We've only failed on one audit within the last few years, and that was because of the admin. Thank you. The admin wasn't filled out properly. It wasn't a danger to anybody. So I think I'm probably going to leave it there. That's a quick. Oh yeah. That's the important thing, I suppose. We've been nominated for an award in inside housing for community
excellence in community-led decision making.
Excellent in community-led decision making. So that's with you guys. We're non-political, as you know. We don't go anywhere near that. You guys do all that. We don't. But we're lucky enough to work with Stephen, Pauline, Rachel, all the groups, and we take them all as partners and we work with them very closely. So if you all want to come up to Manchester in November, then you're more than welcome. And I'm sure WBC will pay for it all. But we're no, seriously, we are the only local authority that is in that group. There's 8 candidates in there, and we're in one of the finalists in there. So hopefully we can come back to Wokingham and show you what we've done and what we can do, because at the end of the day, it's about what we do together. Stephen gets fed up of listening to me banging on about partnerships. That's my ethos. I started this job, I don't know, getting on for 10 years ago now, and when I first came in, people weren't happy, not unless there was blood on the carpet, and with the councils and this and that, and we turned away from that. And now we don't do that. Now we work with people. Our ethos. If there's something to be said, I'll say it, and Susan knows that. But I do say it if I have to say it. But we need to work together. We all need to work together to achieve what we've got. 2,600 homes out there. We've got Gorse Ride coming online. I chair the steering group for Gorse Ride, the regeneration steering group. We've got 136 new social housing coming. Now, this is going to be a major thing for us, a really major thing for us. 136 social housing in the years to come. That's going to be amazing. We've got 60 homeowners moving in there if we can. And we've got 49 flats and apartments that are going to go part rent, part buy to get people started. This is what we need. We need this community rebuilt. We need more social housing. We all see the stuff on Facebook about people crying out for social housing. This is what we need. This is what I'm here to do, is to urge you guys to think about it. And I'm sure you do. I'm sure all the parties think about it, but we want it happening. We want to make it happen because it's so important. Annette and my partner Annette and we brought up 5 children, as you probably already know. They were all brought on a Gorse ride. And they all are homeowners now. They all moved away. They've all got, one of them's got a degree in architecture, and the others have got a really, really good job. One runs his own business, and that's from Gorse Ride. That's from social housing. And it's about what we do with those people and those kids and get them out there, get the communities working together. It's going to be a tough time. I talked to the guys in the regen plan. We need to teach these guys that are moving into these new houses. It's a new way of thinking now. When we heat these places, they aren't going to go into their house and turn the thermostat up and get hot water, hot radiators pumping away. It isn't going to be like that anymore. So we've got to think about how do we help those people to understand how they heat their houses. That is one of the main objectives we've got to do. Get super broadband down there so we don't have satellite dishes all over the walls and wherever. That's what we want. We don't want them cluttering up the places. We want electric charging points. How do we get them electric charging points into the community so people can use them? You know, it's a problem, but we'll deal with it. We'll get it done. So anyway, I'm going to take some questions because Madam Mayor's going to be on my case in a minute, I know. So has anybody got any questions? And Kim's going to spot you if you have, please. Stephen.
Before we go.
Oh, sorry.
Propose the report. Stephen, you're going to propose it. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Prue. Stephen, would you like to speak to the report?
I would indeed, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. And thank you, Steve, for that presentation. I have to say, to begin with, Steve, I think I can bore for England on partnerships, at least as much as you can. I would certainly be able to compete with you very effectively. I want to start by thanking you, Steve, in your capacity as TLIP's chair. I also want to thank all of the other tenant volunteers, and I want to thank the excellent and very committed housing officers who've been working with them for this very inspiring report. It's incredibly moving what you've produced here. And it's very impressive. I have to say that working with the tenant volunteers and the housing officers who facilitate TLIP is one of the most pleasurable aspects of being a councillor. TLIP is a shining example of the kind of partnership, there it is, Steve, partnership, that I try to champion at every opportunity. You mentioned, Steve, the stigma of being a tenant. I think we all want to eradicate that stigma. I hope everyone in this chamber is committed to producing conditions in which every member of our community is judged only by the goodness of their character, and certainly not by their background, their characteristics as a human being, let alone their housing tenure. So we are completely at one on this, Steve. I also endorse your call for more social housing. In fact, it is coincidental. It wasn't in anticipation of your report, but this week I've written in 2 local papers on this very subject. Very much the kind of thing I think you would support. I want to record my special thanks to Steve, whose chairing of TLIP always ensures that we conduct our business efficiently, and as you've seen this evening, with immense good humour. It gives me great pleasure to recommend to Council that we note, it seems a bit tame, but that's what we're required to do, that we note the Tenant Involvement Strategy Draft Action Plan. I have to say it's a bit of a mouthful, but that's what we're supposed to be noting. And we continue to work in partnership to achieve the aspirations of the Tenant Charter. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Stephen. Does anyone wish to speak against the report? Sorry, Rachel. Yeah. Before we move to vote on it, I'd like to take any of the questions that you had that Steve asked for a few minutes ago. Please indicate if you wish to speak. Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not a question, actually. It's just wanted to echo Councillor Conway's comments and gratitude for the update this evening and the really thorough report. It's really impressive and, you know, really helps to drive change in this area. And also just to say congratulations on the being shortlisted for the award. That's really, really good. So thank you very much.
Councillor Blumenthal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you so much, Stephen Kim, for coming here this evening. Of course, I want to reiterate what Councillor Conway has said, and we had the presentation. You could see in the background some of the incredible work that council officers have been doing to really create communities. I'm always impressed on TLIP how much officers go above and beyond and have high standards for social housing tenants, and a lot of that is driven by TLIP and the tenant volunteers. I declare I am on TLIP, but I promise I'm not going to ask an easy question. I know that you've got a lot of passion, as well as the other TLIP members, Steve, to get more young tenant volunteers on TLIP, because at the moment the burden is very much on the older tenants. And do you have plans to really drive more of a priority to get those younger tenants on TLIP so younger tenants have that voice that they deserve?
Quite exciting plans. As I said, we've got this social media apprentice coming in. I don't know whether you guys know or not, but Target Court has been all upgraded, and we've now got teams enabled in there, so we can have hybrid meetings. And one of our plans is to get out there and try and get people that are coming in from work or from any other place, and if we need to have evening meetings or meetings out of hours or whatever, then we're going to do that. If they need to, they can log on wherever they are. We've got a big screen in there now. We're planning to have TLIP down there in October, the first one to have a hybrid meeting in Target. So that's one of the plans. One of the other plans is the more cleverer ones, Kim and Roz and all the other team are coming up with really good ideas. We're trying to get a cinema night for the younger people, where we say, come along, have a chit chat with us, see if you want to get involved, and if after that you can go watch the cinema and we'll get you a pizza and whatever. But we want to engage with them. So that's one of the ways that we want to engage with them. We're thinking about the social media thing. Is you've seen POM's around all over the place. They like following POM. So we try and enhance that. And we're trying to get the social media stuff out there as much as we can, because that's where the younger people are at. But we've got lots of ideas, and we're trying to get more ideas, and we don't care whether we beg, borrow, or, well, we won't steal, but we're trying to get them out there. Any ideas? If you've got any ideas, please let us know, because you're right, Laura, we want to engage with the younger people. In a few years' time, I'm going to pack this lark in, but I don't want it to just go by the wayside. We've got to have people continuing this on. Lee and Nikki are up there. They're big candidates of what we've been doing for the last year. Lee and Nikki have been doing it a lot longer than I have, but we need people to continue that on. So this message keeps on getting plugged away at you guys, and in a few years' time, when somebody else is sitting here, they'll be talking about how we can do this and how we can do that. But there's got to be a legacy. The legacy has got to be younger people. The younger people have got to come through. We've got to find some way of encouraging them through. Sorry, I went on a bit there, Lord.
Thank you. Councillor Bray, please.
Thank you. I do have a question for you, Steve, but before that, I would like to say that as I'm currently exec member for Children's Services, I love Children's Services, but my one regret is I can't do housing as well. I really enjoyed, as Stephen does, the TLIP meetings, which I attended for many years. And as you referred to, and as Stephen referred to, social housing is really important, more social housing. I am so glad that we have our own council houses. It was a narrow squeak a few times 20 years ago or so, but we still got them. And that enables us to have this strong partnership. So my question to you is, what one thing more would you like the council to do to help you and tenants?
That's a big question, Prue, like you always do. You always give me the difficult ones, don't you? One thing. It's just I can't answer that. I can't answer that one, because at any given point, if I need to come to somebody to back me up, I know I can do that. And that's the most important thing to me. If people listen to me, and that means they listen to the involved tenants, and that's a good thing. But somebody said to me, you need a direct line through to the CEO. I've got a direct line through to the CEO. If I've emailed Susan, she'd email me back. If I wanted to talk to Stephen or you, Prue, or Pauline or Rachel or whoever, I know I've got their backing. I know they've got me. That's the only thing we can say. You back me. If you weren't backing me, it'd be a difficult thing. You do. You back me 100%, and back the involved tenants and TLIP and everything like that. That's the important thing. The important thing is the tenants. We got to do that. And if we've got your backing, we're halfway there. We just got to make these things happen. We've got to make social housing happen. And you guys in this room, you make them things happen. And as I said, TLIP's non-political, and we've never been political. And I veer away from that vehemently, because we work in partnership. We want things to happening. And you, Prue, Stephen, Pauline, Rachel, whoever. They're all out there. You're all out there to help us, and that's what we want. We need the backing of you guys, and that's probably the one thing that supports us more than anything. If you didn't, we just wouldn't. We'd be another group, and we're not. We're not another group. As Stephen says, he goes and tells everybody about TLIP, and I know I've been in some of the meetings that he's been in, and he's told about TLIP, and that's encouraging, because he takes us for who we are and what we do. It's serious. It's professional. I keep saying to my guys, we're professionals. We're not involved tenants. We're professionals, and you treat the councillors and everybody else that way. So I can only say thank you to you guys. Thank you to everybody, the councillors, the officers, and everything, for taking TLIP seriously.
Thank you. Pauline Hellyer-Simons, please.
Thank you. It's not a question, but I did want to say to Steve that I worked with you many, many years ago, Steve, when I was the executive member for housing. And I just wanted to give you full credit for all the work that you've done over so many, many years. Back in those days, the whole idea of tenants meetings and a tenants charter were very much in their infancy, and I've watched it grow. I was in that role when the Decent Home Standard came into being. I can remember it well. We were much exercised by trying to meet it, and it's a great joy to me to hear you say tonight that we have met it and our homes are indeed decent for people to live in. I also, in that role, pushed through the council the 35% social housing, and maybe we need more now. And that's something that I'm also very proud of. But the other thing that came through very strongly in your report was the way that you work with the tenants and the partnership and the absolute commitment of the tenants to improving the work that goes on with them. And finally, Steve, I want to just thank you so much for the many, many years of dedication and hard work that you've put into directing the Tenants Forum and the Tenants Charter. It's absolutely astounding. Thank you.
Homes, we can actually dig down now. We've got the performance figures. We can dig down. I can tell you what house needs to be done. We've got probably 3 outstanding. One of them's a new kitchen, and 2 of them, one's a back door and one's windows. And it's amazing to be able to dig down into that sort of depth and say that's all we need. We've got about 80 people or 80 homes that choose not to be brought up to decent homes. But I say every time, are we sure these people don't want it done? Can we send them letters? Make sure that their situation hasn't changed where they want it done now. And we do that regularly to try and help those in that decent home standard. So, and there's a decent home standard 2 coming out. Well, it's being consulted on at the moment, and we're going to have to adhere to that when that comes out and comes through. We've also, with the housing regulator now, there's a consultation out there at the moment about basically they want some money out of us. They want to charge us £8 per property per year for their housing regulator. So with that and the ombudsman who want, how much do they want, Kim?
£5.50.
£5.50 and £8 for the housing regulator. We're talking of £40,000 they want out of the HRA. So we're going to have to start thinking about how we do that and where that comes from, because it's going to go through whether we like it or not. But there's another £40,000 that we're going to have to find out of the budget. And I'm fortunate enough to know where the budgets are, HRA wise, you know, and but I don't get excluded from them things. People trust me enough to understand that it doesn't go any further than this, you know, and that's what we do. That's how professional we are now. So thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Steve. Prue, are you seconding this report? Thank you. We now move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations are set out in the report on page 37. I'm only going to do half sentences from now on. Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Steve, I'd like to say thank you. It's good to see you every year in the council to bring your report, but you always bring it with cheerfulness and honesty and integrity, and we welcome that. We welcome working in partnership with you.
To the officers and to everybody on TLIP and everybody else that gets involved with us as a partner. So thank you very much, and especially thank you to Madam Mayor. Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you. You're very welcome. You can leave the dog if you like, Steve. Let's move on to item 43, Wokingham Borough's Climate Change Emergency Action Plan, the 4th progress report. We have 10 minutes. Sarah, I understand that you're presenting this. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Chris. Sarah, would you like to speak? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure tonight to propose the 4th progress report of the Climate Emergency Action Plan following this Council's unanimous decision to declare a climate emergency. I want to express my heartfelt thanks to everyone involved in the huge number of activities taking place to reduce our emissions, and to the climate team especially for programme managing this work and putting this detailed report together. It is no small undertaking. You will notice that it has been redesigned to facilitate engagement, and we will be going out to the public with it over the coming months for an interactive roadshow. The local cycling and walking infrastructure plan has been adopted, and this has allowed us to successfully bid for funding to improve infrastructure, providing our community with choice as to how they travel. We successfully bid for the local electric vehicle infrastructure fund to help us deploy EV charging infrastructure. And we also successfully bid for the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which means we are able to improve the efficiency of 110 of our social homes, reducing energy bills for our residents. And we are putting on a retrofit boot camp for other housing associations to do the same. This is just a flavour of the activity. This report, however, also acknowledges that the actions we have in our plan are not enough to get us to our carbon neutral aims by 2030. There is a significant gap, and we continue to lack the powers and resource that government refuses to give us. And the announcement yesterday by the Prime Minister has just made that gap even wider. In one swoop yesterday, the PM makes claims that in terms of grid connection, he's reforming the connection queuing system so that shovel-ready schemes are prioritised, something we have been heavily lobbying for. Yet at the same time, he pushes the UK to the back of the queue in terms of our position in the world to embrace the industries that lead us to net zero. Industry requires clarity and consistency, and it is their investments that will produce a low carbon future at lower costs for our communities. Global competition in clean technologies is growing, something he should have grasped when the recent Contracts for Difference auction had not a single offshore wind scheme bid. As Conservative MP Chris Skidmore said yesterday, there is no economy without a green economy. According to the PM, the reforms will save households money, yet delaying transition to more energy efficient homes will have significant costs. 1 in 4 households in the private rented sector live in fuel poverty. Citizens' Advice have quantified the benefits of improving energy efficiency in these homes. £24 billion saved on customers' energy bills by 2030, 670,000 children stopped from developing asthma, and 6,000 excess winter deaths each year prevented, saving the NHS £2 billion by 2030. The PM didn't get the memo. He has rolled over to the right wing of his party rather than stand up and lead. We have, however, will continue to lead. Going back to tonight's report, it is key that we demonstrate our continued commitment, and this remains as strong as ever.
Thank you, Sarah. Does any member wish to speak against the report? Thank you. You may speak. Thank you. Sorry, Prue.
Can I stand, Madam Mayor, to ask that we suspend Standing Order 4221, which only allows 10 minutes for this motion? If we're going to have people speaking against, I think we're going to need to extend it to the normal half hour that we would have for a debate, if that's acceptable to people.
Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. Can we go to the vote, please? Four, yes, four, yeah. Thank you. And against? Yes, we'll extend the time. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to be brief anyway, but Madam Mayor, this report is. Oh. Stephen, I thought you were interrupting me. Madam Mayor, this report is deeply disappointing. The Climate Emergency Action Plan, approved by this Council in January 2020, has bold, challenging, but achievable initiatives to make Wokingham a carbon neutral borough by 2030. With less than 7 years to go, the Lib Dems have wasted the past 12 months. This report takes plenty of credit for progress by others, but no responsibility for its own failure to deliver to this plan. For example, the report mentions nearly 26,000 trees planted with a saving of nearly 4,000 tonnes of CO2. But these are largely a result of voluntary organisations, schools and residents. It also mentions the Eco3 scheme, which is a government scheme to improve energy efficiency in houses and replace ageing boilers. Energy suppliers are responsible for this delivery, but the report takes credit for achievements. Finally, it highlights the increased recycling, which is down to the dedication of our residents and not as a result of the council's ill-founded plan to introduce fortnightly waste collection. Food recycling rates are actually reducing since the removal of caddy liners by the Lib Dems. The report is packed with feasibility studies, assessments and consultations, and light on tangible actions to get the council on track for zero carbon by 2030. The current plan still leaves the borough with a carbon footprint of 240,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. Using the council's own figures, we would need to cover the whole borough in trees to offset that level of carbon emissions. Councillor Kerr says the following in this report: we need more resources and support from central government to deliver the bold decarbonisation actions set out in this plan. And in her speech earlier, she spent the whole time talking about central government policy and blaming central government and not focusing on the delivery of decarbonisation within the borough. It is clear, Madam Mayor, that Liberal Democrats are planning to blame central government for their failure to deliver.
Thank you. Chris, you seconded this motion. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak or speak now?
I reserve my right to listen to the other observers.
Thank you. Gary Cowan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the first points I have difficulty with is after we have a debate and anything, you say, is anybody against it? But I'm not against it, nor am I for it. So I don't know where I fit into the system. One of the big problems is on recommendations 1 and 2, I think are okay, but recommendations 3 and 4, I think, are the keys. And I won't go into boring details on emissions for this, that, and the other. I'll just go into some more general points. The biggest failing of this document is its lack of links and the Chinese walls between it and other departments within the council. For example, children in Arborfield are sent to school in Keephatch. Now, how environmentally friendly is that and how green is that? But it goes on. I made a case to the planning department on protecting trees in Hall Farm, a site for which the council want to put 4,500 houses on. And I said, we need to be able to put a blank TPO on the trees there so we can protect the trees while we develop the site or plan to develop the site. The answer I got from the planning department was no. But they did add that if there was the odd tree around the boundary that warranted TPO protection, they might consider it. This would suggest to me that trees are less important than houses. And trees are good for the environment, houses not necessarily unless they're to the highest spec. With respect to highways, they built a hotel on the Mole Road when they knew, and it was recognised that the traffic level on that road was above capacity, and so therefore was the pollution. Now we have this scenario where we have this wonderful policy to try and right all these wrongs. But when it comes down to the environment, when it comes down to education, children's services, when it comes down to highways, they lose. Or I would rephrase that: the whole environmental plan set out in this climate emergency loses because these other the departments do this work without them having to refer to climate emergency. And in a way, if you want to make this document any good, what you need to do is you need to take all the policies that are being set in it, put them forward through a planning inspector and the local plan update, and get a local plan inspector to rule. Then they would have proper teeth. As it stands now, wonderful to read, a great read, but worthless. Thank you.
Councillor Croy, please.
Well, I thought last night was bad, and then Councillor Harper popped up. I mean, that was the most uninformed commentary on the plan I have ever heard. And you really want to have a word with the ex-councillor Gregor Murray before you pop up again, because that was just awful. And I hope this group is not basing their voting on what he said, because it was dire. Right. The plan acknowledges there is a gap between what we want to achieve and what we can achieve. The plan makes clear that Wokingham Borough needs more resources and support from government. The plan is very much about what we can do with the resources we have and the resources we might be able to generate as a borough council. It's a recognisable descendant of the original plan. It's not the same plan. It's far more realistic. I am more hopeful now than I have ever been that the borough is honestly engaged with our responses to the challenges we face. It is against this background of modest hope that yesterday I watched the most disgraceful, dishonest and retrograde piece of cowardly political gaslighting that I have ever seen. We saw an appeal for honesty and clarity that was riddled with lies and deliberate obfuscation. It was a bonfire of straw dummies presented by a straw man Prime Minister, a case study in short-termism, a desperate scrabble to salvage a few Conservative MPs from the wreckage of the next election. Every sentence was littered with falsehoods. In just one speech, he joined Johnson and Truss in improving himself as one of the most unfit people to hold office that we have ever seen, and he is not an example to any of us here. He has surrendered any claim at all that this country, a G7 country, had to any moral leadership in the transition to net zero. He has demolished a once-in-a-century chance for Britain to show leadership in the technologies that would dominate the rest of the century and beyond. Sunak is not worried about 7 recycling bins. He's worried about the dustbin of history. His speech was not about carbon net zero in 2050. It was a desperate attempt to avoid Tory net zero in 2024. It's scorched earth politics that will literally contribute to a scorching of the earth. He can avoid his plague of imaginary bins, but he won't be able to avoid the judgment of 2024. This plan, our plan, is more serious than Sunak. Our plan is more honest than Sunak. Our plan will endure for far longer than Sunak's government. Our plan, almost an identical plan, has been voted for by many people here for the last 4 years. Our plan deserves our support because it is honest about the challenges and it is honest about what we can do. Our plan proves that where Sunak brings lies and despair, good people are working hard to bring hope and positive action. We must vote for this plan because when our government is against us, we must look to ourselves. Thank you.
Councillor Conway, please.
Follow that, I think. I'm not going to even attempt Andy's flights of rhetoric, but though the government has very, very disappointingly surrendered our nation's leadership role in tackling climate emergency, Wokingham Borough Council remains committed to providing leadership at the local level. I commend to colleagues this report on progress, and I want to thank both Sarah and the excellent officers in our climate emergency team for their efforts. The efforts they're trying to make to ensure that the council lives up to its responsibilities. And I have to say, I was very disappointed to hear Peter's comments, not least because I'm afraid they completely underplayed the really strong commitment and hard work that our officers have been making. And I want to take this opportunity, if I may, to take a particular note of the part played by Sabrina Chiaretti, who will shortly be leaving for pastures new. I'm sure all councillors will want to join me in thanking her warmly for all the work she's been putting in on our climate emergency measures and wish her good fortune for the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Ferris, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to, on the points that Gary raised, there were some important points there, particularly regarding linking into the local plan. I can assure you that we are attempting to future-proof the local plan, the new one that is being developed, to bring in as much of the climate change and climate activity as possible. We've had a number of sessions with the planning officers, and we've got another one scheduled shortly to go through that to ensure that we can make the new local plan, as I call future-proofed as possible, to bring that in. So you made a good point there, Gary.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Clive Jones, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. The thought of Tory net zero in 2024, I really like that. Really like the thought of that. So there has been a consensus amongst the major political parties that recognise that the climate emergency has to be addressed and addressed urgently. Yesterday, sadly, the consensus was shattered when the Prime Minister watered down key energy pledges. This is putting the UK at the back of the queue as the rest of the world races to embrace green technologies and the industries of tomorrow. This has been done to appease the right of the Conservative Party, who are still calling the shots as far as policy is concerned. Even the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, urges Rishi Sunak to stick with existing net zero targets, saying that businesses must have certainty. This doesn't help families who are struggling with the cost of living crisis now. It puts green jobs in jeopardy and risks our children's future. Business leaders are up in arms about this, and the majority of car manufacturers agree that pushing back the 2030 ban on new petrol and diesel sales by 5 years is a hugely retrograde step, which puts politics ahead of net zero gains. This was a disappointing statement from the Prime Minister, which I hope he will very quickly reverse. Madam Mayor, the progress report on the Climate Emergency Action Plan shows that the Council is making good progress, and I'd like to thank all of the officers for their hard work on this topic that is of vital importance to the future of our planet. Thank you.
And now Councillor Chris Johnson, before Sarah has the right to reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the last few days, first reported in the press as a leak from Downing Street, then finally confirmed in a speech by the Prime Minister, the Tory government are openly confirming that they are running out of cash and need to take the foot off climate action and put the foot on the brakes and head towards climate disaster. For the first time in my memory, the Greens and manufacturers, the likes of Ford Motor Company and others, mortal enemies for decades, are now of one voice. Do not mess with the commitments to overcome the climate emergency. You do harm to the economy, harm to business, harm to the population, and worse, critically wound nature. This council declared a climate emergency and set out on a path that today leads to the Climate Emergency Action Plan set before you and towards carbon neutrality. The officers and staff of Wokingham Borough Council have invested months of their lives to carry out our wishes and produce the Climate Emergency Action Plan and enact it. We must not let the mumblings and bumblings in Westminster derail this council from its commitment or tasks. We do this for our community and for ourselves. The Climate Emergency Action Plan is the council's blueprint. It should not be watered down to satisfy attempts to attract votes.
And now your right to reply, Sarah, please.
Thank you. I'm surprised to need a right of reply for this, but here goes. I've scribbled down a few notes, but I'm a bit shocked by some of the insulting comments that were made earlier, if I'm honest. But I just want to be very clear that this is about action on what we directly have the ability to influence and our sphere of influence as well. This is about working in partnership. This is about enabling and empowering as well. This is not just about direct action, but all of us working together and how we can bring people together. And I want to echo Stephen's comments as well about officers, and in particular Sabrina. It's been an absolute pleasure working with someone who is so committed, so dedicated, just so knowledgeable and just so hardworking. So I just want to echo that. Our role as local leaders is to provide vision and to give hope. And given the announcement that has come out from government yesterday, I know many people are upset, angry and heartbroken about it. And I want to assure people that there is hope that we can achieve what we need to achieve. And we find hope in action. The world has changed before. And when the world did change before, it wasn't because a prime minister or CEO or celebrity decided it had to. It was when ordinary people decided that they should, they could and they would. This comes from local level action. That's when we saw the abolition of slavery. That's when we saw women having the vote. It's this groundswell of local vision and action that does that. And we're seeing that there is hope in the resilience and determination of communities, individuals and businesses across the UK. And in terms of our action plan here, the action that gives that hope, I mean, just a few extra things I want to mention. You know, we're talking there about our adaptation plan that we're doing, which is a huge part of this process. We know that there are going to be, and already are, some aspects of climate change that we're not going to be able to mitigate. And we have to adapt to protect the vulnerable in society. We are working on a carbon mitigation asset policy. This is to consider how our property portfolio can go above and beyond what planning requirements and big building regulations are. We need to be leaders, and this is the way that we're doing it. I also want to announce Groveland's Park Accommodation Project has just been shortlisted for the Best Low Carbon Project in the Royal Berkshire Property Awards, which is a massive achievement, a huge achievement. So well done, officers. I hope this fourth progress report demonstrates that action is being taken, that we're serious, and where the PM is failing, we're bringing leadership, when we're providing leadership in abundance. And I hope that to everyone that is deeply saddened by what was said yesterday, that we can provide that hope, that we will get there, we will.
Thank you. We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 49, please raise your hands. All those against? All those abstaining? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. Item 44, the pay policy statement. We have 30 minutes to debate this. I understand Councillor Rachel Bishop Firth is presenting the report. Is that right, Rachel? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Prue. Thank you, Prue. Thank you, Pauline. Yeah. Rachel, would you like to speak now?
Thank you very much. Woking Borough Council is required to provide information every year on how we pay our staff. This provides transparency to our residents on how we manage this issue, and I'm pleased to be able to present this year's update to the Council. Woking Borough Council provides a broad range of services to over 177,000 people in a climate where the central government grant is failing to keep pace with inflation and needs in many areas are rising. Many of the services that we provide are to residents who are vulnerable. Some of our officers have to deal with complex, emotionally charged situations. Others have to deal with complex legal, technical and commercial challenges. It's essential that Wokingham can attract and retain the staff who will provide the best possible support to our residents. We therefore need to be responsible and realistic in our staffing and pay decisions with due regard to the market. The pay report looks at how we can get this balance right in these very tough times so that we can continue to deliver to our residents. In summary, as is normal practice, our most senior officers receive a spot salary benchmarked against the market and subject to nationally agreed increases. Other roles typically have a grade set by evaluation, with incremental steps to reward increases in experience and increases set in national bargaining. In a few cases, a different national framework applies, such as some teaching-related roles. The salaries quoted here refer to those paid to our most senior officers during the previous council year. I wanted to say a few words about the pay that we give to our lowest paid employees. I'd like to note that the lowest salary paid to a regular employee of the council last year was £10.79 an hour. This was higher than the government statutory minimum national living wage for that year, and also higher than the voluntary real living wage for that year, which was £9.90 an hour. The council committed last year to investigate becoming an accredited real living wage employer, and I'm pleased to say that we're going to be investigating that later on in this council year. I would like to thank the officers for their work on this report and to the Personnel Board for their consideration of it. I'm pleased to recommend this report for your acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you. The report's been presented and seconded several times. Would anyone like to speak against the report? Rachel Burgess, please. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Rachel. We need to go back to the seconder. Prue.
I'll reserve my right. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Rachel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Once again, I was sorry to see there's no mention of gender pay in this report. The Council's gender pay gap report's not even referenced as a relevant document. At this point last year, I was assured that the Liberal Democrats would address this if they could. It's not a legal requirement to include this, but the guidance under which the document was prepared, which is referenced at 1.3 in the report, does make reference to the gender pay gap, and specifically that the Council should ensure that the pay structures are not discriminatory, and it encourages organisations to make information public relating to workforce gender profiles and aspects of pay. For 22-23, the mean average gender pay gap at WBC was 14.1%. This is worse than the local authority average and 14 percentage points worse than neighbouring Reading Borough Council's gap, which comes in at 0.1%. I accept that gender pay gap analysis is reviewed by the Personnel Board. I also understand that gender pay gap is different to equal pay, and also that different organisations have different structures, for example, in terms of outsourcing services. I understand all of that, but can it really be acceptable that the average pay for men in the council is over 14% higher than the average pay for women? The only way to improve such a gender pay gap is to proactively put measures in place to close it. And those are exactly the kind of measures as referenced in the LGA guidance, which should be detailed in this policy. I would go further and suggest the policy should also include information on other diversity gaps, such as ethnicity or socio-economic background, although I do welcome Rachel's comments on the living wage accreditation, which I fully support. We should be showing leadership on these matters and being really transparent about them and not excluding them from the document altogether. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Cowan, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the current financial state of councils generally, when I look at the agenda, page 81, there are 4 bullet points there. And the second one I agree completely with, which says policy on the remuneration of the lowest paid. And I think that should be fleshed out and it should be resolved. Councillor Burgess's comment on the other elements that are also missed out in this report, I would support as well. But that's the bottom line, is policy of the remuneration of the lowest paid is where I am at. The rest of it I disagree with.
Thank you. Councillor Jorgensen, please. Pauline Jorgensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd refer Rachel to watching the video of a very good personnel board we had last night. We had a very, very long discussion about a report that was presented, which showed very clearly pay disparities and pay trends, both separated by ethnicity, by sex, by more or less anything you could possibly want. There was a very, very useful debate. I think we came to some quite good conclusions. I would suggest she watches the video of the meeting. I think it was very worthwhile, and I'd like to congratulate Rachel for actually chairing that very well and making sure that we covered all the points properly.
Thank you, Pauline. There's a seconder wish to speak now.
Just very briefly, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to say much the same thing as Pauline, that the report that she referred to is called the Workforce Equalities Monitoring Report, and it was discussed yesterday at Personnel Board in some detail, and we looked specifically at things like the evidence for the gender pay gap, the ethnicity pay gap, and we looked at disability in some depth. And I would like to reassure Rachel Burgess that this is taken seriously, and I'm sure we can discuss it outside this meeting if she needs more information. And I have already sent her a copy of that report, but I would say she could watch the meeting, and I'm sure she can have a briefing from the head of HR as to what we discussed.
Thank you. Rachel, you now have your right to reply.
Thank you very much. There's not an awful lot more I can add to what Prue and Pauline have kindly said. I think this is an issue that we are scrutinising very closely in the Personnel Board. We do, of course, provide reports separately on the gender pay gap and also on the pay between the different ethnic groups. And this is something that we will continue to work on and set actions so that we can ensure that all of our employees are fairly paid. Thank you very much.
We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 215, please raise your hands. It looks like that's unanimous. No, not quite. Yeah. Thank you. All those against? And all those abstaining? The recommendations are carried. Item 45 on the agenda, Prevention and Youth Justice Service. And I'm being very careful how I say that so that you don't misinterpret it. The Youth Justice Plan, we have 10 minutes for this. I'd like to highlight that the public sector equality duty does apply to this report and is covered in the body of the report itself. I understand Councillor Prue is proposing the report. Is that correct, Prue? Is there a seconder? Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for pointing out the bit about the public sector equality duty, because it is important. So local authorities have a statutory duty to submit an annual youth justice plan to the Youth Justice Board. This is one of the requirements to ensure that we receive the Youth Justice Board grant payment. As their grant makes up a substantial proportion of the budget for the service, not getting it would be a bit of a disaster. The plan was submitted to the Youth Justice Board on the 30th of June, and so is coming to the Council after the event. This is an unfortunate consequence of scheduling conflicts in terms of data availability, the deadline for the submission to the Youth Justice Board, and the timing of council meetings. We will try to find a solution, but it may prove difficult. It has at least made it onto the council agenda this year, which has not happened in the past, for 20 years, I might add. We are fortunate that in our borough we have a team of multi-agency partners who are committed to a child-first approach, engaging with children on the edge of offending or vulnerable to crime, which helps us to have low numbers of youth offenders. We are also fortunate that all agencies work together to keep offending levels low, albeit within quite tight resource constraints. 2022-23 was a successful year for the service. I'm not proposing to read out the full list of key achievements, which you can find on page 227 of the agenda, but I would like to highlight the fact that in May, the team was awarded the Youth Justice Send Quality Mark, recognising the quality of their services for children with special educational needs. And I would also draw your attention to the fact that reoffending is on a downwards trajectory, as is the percentage of offenders who have reoffended. Serious youth violence is thankfully low, and the number of children who end up in court has decreased. The focus in this year's plan remains very much on prevention, and the service will be looking at school exclusions and exploitation responses as two key areas to address in that regard. They will also continue to focus on the impact of ethnicity, which seems to be disproportionate, and to further develop their ability to provide appropriate and tailored interventions for neurodiverse children. That's just a quick summary of the plan. I commend it to you as an example of a service delivering successful outcomes despite limited resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mickleborough, do you wish to reserve your right to speak until those who want to speak against the report have spoken?
Yes, I reserve my right. Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor.
Anyone that would like to speak against the report? Councillor Croy.
Thank you. We're going to vote against this because we are deeply uncomfortable with the report being brought before council that hasn't been through scrutiny. I appreciate what Prue said. It's never happened in 10 or 20 years, whatever the period is. But again, that is also something which needs to be looked at in scrutiny. Stuff doesn't make sense. The local board is dependent on funding, but we've not submitted the paperwork in the last 20 years that entitles us to the funding. And it says there's a line there about mandating. You know, it's not been mandated, but at the same time, it's a requirement. The report doesn't make sense to me when you look at it. And as I said, the most important thing is, do we want reports coming to council that haven't been properly scrutinised? So that's why we're going to be voting against it. I'm sure there's lots of good things in there, but stuff needs to go through scrutiny.
Thank you. Just one more speaker. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On this side of the House, we have also been through this report. It is statutory. The things that Prue has talked about, it has worked well. It has been long-standing that it should have been brought before this council. I apologise for that, for my stewardship at that time. The fact that we happen to have lost a bit of paperwork is an irrelevance. We will be both voting for it.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Hillier-Simons, please.
Thank you. First, I'd like to pay tribute to the Youth Justice people because they do an incredibly difficult job and have a lot of success. The report talks an awful lot about prevention, intervention and support. And I'd just like to remind the officers who are involved in this through Councillor Bray that the fire service offers what they call the Young Firefighters scheme, and it's aimed at vulnerable children. And I don't think we use it enough. And I've spoken to some young people who've been through it, and they assure me that their lives have been completely turned around. So I wonder whether perhaps, Prue, you could pass on to the officers to use that service a little bit more, because the fire service is anxious to work with young, vulnerable children. Thank you.
Thank you. Those weren't really against, but thank you for those remarks. Councillor Mickleborough.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Bray has acknowledged Andy's understandable unease regarding the timing of the bringing of this report to the council, and has undertaken to explore possibilities for improving and addressing this issue. But I'm sure that many of us, will also share the unease that you quite understandably, have expressed this evening. I too would also like to acknowledge the work that the Youth Justice Service does. I think it's commendable, and the list of some of the achievements that they've made included in this report, is bears solid witness to this. I also like to thank Councillor Pauline Hillier-Simons for her suggestions about possibilities for closer work with the fire service. That's exactly the kind of constructive contributions, that I think are enormously beneficial, to our borough and to our residents. And so thank you very much for that. For all of these reasons, I would like to commend this report to the council, and I hope that we will be able to vote to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to the vote, Prue, you have the right to reply.
Thank you, Madam. I won't take up too much time. I'd like to reassure Andy Croy that we have always submitted the plan as a council. It's just that it's never come before the council formally. And I absolutely agree with him that it really ought to go through scrutiny. I'm sure Andrew, who has just seconded the motion as current chair of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny, will be very glad to see it in front of the committee, and I'm sure we can arrange it for next time. And I welcome Pauline's offer from the fire service, and also acknowledge, Graham, I don't think you need to take personal responsibility for it never having come to the report, but it's very kind of you to say that. We will be bringing it again. We will try and work out the timing better, and we will put it before scrutiny. This is halfway there, and it will be better next time.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. Please, will you vote to agree the recommendations as set out in the report? Ask for who votes against, please. Yeah. Any in favour, or who's in favour? Thank you. That looks almost unanimous. Who's abstaining? Anyone voting against? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Item 46 on the agenda, Finch Hampstead Neighbourhood Plan. We have 30 minutes for this. I understand Councillor Lindsay Ferris is proposing the report. Is that correct, Lindsay? Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Lindsay, would you like to speak? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased that in only a few months, we have another of our parish councils who have navigated through their neighbourhood plan process. This time it is the Finch Hampstead Parish Council, and I would like to say a very big thank you to all those involved in putting the Finch Hampstead neighbourhood plan together, especially the parish council, but also those residents who assisted, and most importantly, those residents who supported the plan by voting for it at the referendum on the 7th of September. The result, an 88% yes vote on the 26% turnout, shows that a significant number of the Finch Hampstead residents have faith in the plan. I therefore ask the council to support the recommendations as shown in the documentation, and that we support the adoption of this neighbourhood plan with Finch Hampstead.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I have a question to officers on this item.
Could you ask your question?
The question is, if this neighbourhood plan is adopted, which I hope it is, I hope everybody supports it, what weight does that carry when it is considered for planning applications now that we don't have a 5-year land supply?
We'll do a written response to that question for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does any member wish to speak against the report? We now move to the vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 265.
Second.
Oh, sorry, the seconder, David, did you wish to speak? No.
Oh, Mayor, thank you.
No, sorry.
Oh, don't see it.
No. I got 2 ears and they've both got things coming in. We move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 265, please raise your hands. Thank you. Anyone against the report? Any abstentions? Thank you. That is unanimous. The report is carried. Item 47, the appointment of a parish council representative to the Standards Committee. I understand Councillor Morag Mulvin is proposing this report. Is that right, Morag?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it is.
Can I ask if there's a seconder first?
There is.
Who's seconding the report? Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Morag. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask. Oh, excuse me. I do apologise. I would like to propose Councillor Jackie Jagger from Twyford Parish Council to be appointed to the Standards Committee as the Parish Council representative on that committee. Thank you.
Anyone that wishes to speak against this report? No, thank you. Caroline, did you wish to speak?
No, that's fine.
Thank you. We now move to a vote on the item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 279, please raise your hands. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The recommendation is carried. Sorry.
Madam Mayor, may we have a 5-minute comfort break?
We certainly may.
Yes, thank you.
We'll have a 5-minute comfort break. Thank you. We're now on item 48, authorisation of procurement strategy on the agency worker contract. We have 30 minutes. I understand Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay is proposing the report. Is that true, Imogen?
Yes,
Who
it
is
is.
your seconder? Thank you, Rachel.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth.
Thank you. Imogen, would you like to speak to the report? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, this report is not about authorising the hiring of agency staff. It's not about setting financial expectations or a business case for hiring these kinds of staff workers. This is managed by our personnel board, not the finance and procurement teams, and agency hires have to be agreed by our directors and assistant directors. This report is about setting the procurement strategy that we should follow on the occasions where we have to hire agency workers. While this council has done much to reduce the need for temporary agency staff, we will still have to have some need to use them, either for short-term projects where we need very specific skills, or to cover statutory obligations. Our statutory obligations when full-time staff are just not available. All agency staff are signed at director level and off at director level, and a monthly report is reviewed by a corporate leadership team. So what we are seeking here from this council is agreement to continue using the MSTAR framework for procurement. MSTAR is a national framework agreement that is used by most councils in the country and uses multiple agencies to ensure that the prices paid for our agency staff remain competitive. The current provider we use, Matrix SCM, uses this framework, and they have proved their worth by saving money for the council and providing the best value for money for the transparent and competitive manner. This includes continual benchmarking, monitoring with KPIs, and regular performance reporting. We are seeking to award a contract to a supplier to using the MSTAR framework, which will be continued for another year, and following their annual review, there is the option for a rolling agreement for the next 3 years. Because the total value of this service is over 5 million, that is why it has to be agreed by full council, and that is why we're here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak against the report? Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Gary, can I stop you? I'm wrong again. I need to go to the seconder first before you.
I'd like to reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Now, Councillor Cowan.
On page 150, it's just the second paragraph in the top box. It talks of the most cost-effective solution is now recommended to be to continue of the current model of service, and it goes into all sorts of words I don't understand. I would probably suggest that that's probably the easy option. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best option. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, do you wish to speak now?
Super. Thank you very much. What we're looking at here is a framework which will allow the council to procure agency staff in the most effective and cost-effective way possible. It's the responsibility of the finance team to set out the procurement strategy for agency staff, but they work closely with the human resources team when they do this. This arrangement has got the full support of the AD for HR and OD, and myself as the chair of personnel board, and I just wanted to say a few words about this. The numbers and payment of agency staff, as Imogen has just said, is a different issue from the framework of the procurement of these agency staff. We review the numbers and payment of agency staff on a regular basis at the personnel board. I've taken steps this year to move as many of these discussions into part one of the personnel board as possible to increase the transparency of the discussions on this. As we've noted in these discussions, the council continues to make efforts to reduce the requirement for agency staff through the recruitment of employees. We also note that the appointment of agency staff can on occasion provide the best and most cost-effective solution to residents because, for example, it allows us to buy in specialist skills for a short period of time and enables the council to operate without interruption to service levels. But I do need to stress that those are different discussions and they're not under consideration tonight. What we're doing tonight is asking the council to continue with the operation of a standard framework which has been very successfully in place for a number of years for the procurement of agency staff, and which we've assessed to be the best and most cost-effective system for Woking Borough Council. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to a vote. Oh, Imogen, do you want to respond?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. We now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendations as set out in the report on page 283. Thank you. Good, you're so well trained. Are there any against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's carried. We now come to item 49 on the agenda, member question time. I'd like to invite members to put their hands up if they have a question. I have a list of speakers of questions already. Okay. 49-1, Andrew Mickleborough has asked a question of the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to Paul Fishwick, the Executive Member for Active Travel, Highways and Transport. The quite recently laid micro asphalt in Kitwood Drive and roads off in Lower Early has been badly damaged in many places. Residents say by contractors working in the area. The area of damage is extensive and I believe not unique to this particular locality. Albeit as a layperson, I believe that the damage in this and other instances is of sufficient severity to severely reduce the lifespan of the recently maintained road surface. What recourse does Woking Borough Council have to ensure that contractors found to be responsible for road damage, such as this, can be required to help to rectify that damage?
Thank you, Andrew, for your question. The council has the power under the New Roads and Streetworks Act statutory code specification for the reinstatement of openings in the highway, and it requires companies that dig up the road to reinstate to a national standard. The senior streetworks inspector has inspected the damage caused by the utility company City Fibre and has issued a formal defect notice to them as a result. We cannot give a timeline for when these repairs will be carried out at the present, but can confirm we will be requiring City Fibre to liaise with the Council's Capital Schemes and Highway Assets team to make sure that the repairs meet the standards of the existing surface.
And did you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, thank you. Thank you, Paul. I note that you are unable to provide a timeline for when these repairs will be carried out and would appreciate some explanation, some more detailed explanation as to why this is so that I can feed back to our residents. I imagine, for example, that it's possible that the extent and the nature of the roadworks in this instance, these are not minor repairs, are such that they might have to be included in a future WBC Highways programme, with City Fibre then responsible for reimbursing the costs. If so, I imagine there could be a considerable period of time elapsed before the works are completed.
Thank you, Andrew, for your supplementary. Yes, it is micro asphalt surface. That's a seasonal type treatment, which can only really be carried out during the summer months. Hence why City Fibre has got to liaise with the Highways and Assets team for that work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Gary Cowan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll ask the question standing in my name.
Thank you, Gary, for your question. This is a slightly muddled question. It is the role of a sustainability appraisal and strategic environmental assessment to help understand the effects of an emerging local plan rather than set infrastructure requirements. As you will be aware, a sustainability appraisal incorporating a strategic environmental assessment has been prepared and published for all stages of the emerging local plan update to date. Turning to infrastructure, infrastructure delivery plans have also been produced and published alongside the emerging local plan. These documents set out the infrastructure required to help mitigate the impacts of development. No decisions have been made regarding the future development strategy for the borough. The work programme for the local plan was agreed by the executive in July 23. For any site that is included in the local plan update, there will be policies and requirements in the infrastructure delivery plan that are clear in the infrastructure required to be delivered or contributed to as part future development proposals. A combination of SIL and or Section 106 are used to deliver that infrastructure with delivery phased through the period of construction. Any development of scale will expect to deliver a full suite of infrastructure to serve incoming existing local residents and businesses. If allocated, Hall Farm would be no different.
Thank you. Gary, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, the Lib Dems, I believe, learnt the lesson of over 20 years ago when they supported more housing in the Berkshire Structure Plan. And they were virtually wiped out then, and they only got back into power thanks to support from two independents, one who they think treated quite disgracefully, I think. So I would suggest to Labour, watch out. I feel sorry for them 20 years ago, so I considered offering them the use of the old red telephone box in Arborfield for the group meetings. In Wokingham paper today, the Lib Dem leader said the government sets the council's housing targets, and he added that the government tells the councils how many new homes they must plan. Planning permission for a 15-year local period, and I'll emphasise that 15-year local plan period. A 15-year plan period, not a 30-year plan period, which the Lib Dems are supporting, but they don't seem to have the guts to come clean and admit it. The same leader of the Lib Dems...
Gary, can I stop you? You're making a statement. Would you like to put your question, please?
All right, well, I'll get quickly to the question if I'm not allowed to speak. I understand being shut up. My question is, having misled the residents twice on housing numbers, do they think that doing it for a third time, they can get away with it? Oh, and as a side, I'll still have the red telephone box ready if they need it.
I actually thought better of you, Gary, than that, but never mind. We are in the situation that we have a annual figure of 795 homes per year as the figure that's been allocated to this area. It's been changed slightly. It wobbles about each year.
Lindsay, could you speak into the microphone rather than turning around?
Okay, sorry. We have an annual housing number allocated to this council, as is everywhere around the country. The figure at the moment is 795 homes per annum. It is not a figure that we are keen on, but it is the figure that is allocated to the council area. And it's the same for whether it's Reading or West Berks or wherever. So we are dependent upon delivering a local plan that meets those numbers.
Lindsay, could you stand and look at me and talk into your microphone? Don't turn round.
We are currently in the situation that the government is in the process of redoing the planning documentation, in particular the MPPF. In the draft MPPF, which was consulted on in the Christmas to over through to March, there was a draft proposal which included the allowance of including over provision of homes in one local plan to be taken account into the next local plan. And that is the situation that we in Wokingham Borough are currently in. We have lost our 5-year land supply because too many houses were built, particularly between the period 2015 to 2022. And therefore, we have lost our 5-year land supply for that reason. We have overprovided. If the government does come up with the proposal in their final MPPF to take account of overprovision, our new local plan would not need to take account of best part of 2,000 houses or dwellings. The current figure, the exact figure of overprovision was 1727. That was the calculation.
Thank you, Lindsay. You're out of
time. That's where we are. Thank you.
Peter Harper, please, will you ask your question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In light of the recent issue with rack panels in schools with the associated safety risk, what surveys have the council carried out on schools and other Woking Borough Council property to identify the existence of rack panels?
Thank you for your question. So following recent guidance from the Department for Education, WBC Property Services identified 26 maintained schools and 1 child and adolescent mental health services unit within the borough that required further inspection to provide assurance that there was no reinforced aerated autoclaved concrete within the structural elements of the school construction. The council's property services, using technically proficient in-house property staff, carried out visual inspections to all schools to provide such reassurance. The DfE website confirming our zero return position was updated on Friday the 8th of September as requested by them. The other state schools in the borough are academies and free schools, and they do not come directly within the council's remit. However, we have written to all of them about the need for surveys and offering support if required. We believe that further information was needed from a couple of those schools, but there is no reason to suppose that any of them are at risk. It was lack of information, not actual information. Property Services has further carried out a desktop review and risk profile of all of the property estate. 1 building has been identified with confirmed presence of rack. This is the former Marks and Spencer's building at 28 to 38 Peach Street, Wokingham. The rack is not structural and is in an area of the building not accessed by the public. In the long term, it has already been proposed that we would replace this part of the structure if we proceed with the decision to move the council's headquarters from Shoot End into that building, which is flagged up in the published agenda that was published yesterday. So the presence of rack does not have any impact on the ability to deliver that move. A number of other relatively low-risk sites have been identified that require further, more detailed visual inspection to provide assurance, which is currently being undertaken with internal resources. We expect those surveys to be completed by the end of the month. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Peter, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I have to say I'm concerned with the statement to say that you're using internal surveyors to do this work. My understanding that neighbouring authorities are using specialist rack surveyors because it's a complicated matter. Can I ask if the lead member will look at using specialist surveyors to carry out this work rather than internal staff?
We have used qualified staff, as far as I am aware, and there is no requirement because the risk is so small. The likelihood is so small in any case. I am confident that they are competent to do the job which they have been tasked with, and perhaps if other local authorities don't have that capacity internally, that's their lookout and not ours.
Thank you. Councillor Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm raising this in the chamber so my conscience is clear. There's an accident waiting to happen. In my ward, there's a permanent line of cars parked on Fairwater Drive at the junction of Highgate Road. This is where primary school children cross to get to school and cannot see over the cars. Despite near misses of vehicles pushed to one side of the road on a blind bend, the council has decided that the area is safe and installing a formal crossing a low priority. Please can you ask officers to revisit their decision, or at least can you meet with residents and myself on site who are upset with the council's lack of action?
Thank you, Laura, for your question. As you must know, a lot of work has already been done, including meeting with residents. The traffic management team receives over 40 requests per annum for pedestrian crossings, over 200 requests for parking restrictions and amendments, and over 100 requests for traffic management speed limit changes. We cannot afford to do them all. I also need to have a clear conscience, and that is why this administration is committed to doing road improvements in order of priority need. There are other locations in the borough that have to take precedence, as far as road safety is concerned. We only have limited funds, and it is important we spend them wisely and where they will have the most impact on safety. However, we believe there is an alternative solution that will improve road safety in Fairwater Drive, especially at the junction with Highgate Road, where parked cars have the potential to obstruct sight lines for pedestrians, particularly primary school children. The Highways team has considered the possibility of extending the existing double yellow lines slightly further to enhance visibility for pedestrians. This measure would discourage parking in critical areas, thereby improving safety. We are working to include this in Amendment 2, which is programmed to be advertised in January 2024. This will bring about safety improvements without the need to wait for a crossing. We will continue to keep the formal pedestrian crossing on our list for annual review and prioritisation for when new budgets become available.
Thank you. Laura, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, I do. Thank you for your answer. I did request that the lines be extended, and I was told no, it's not needed. So it sounds as if things have developed, which is good news. How far is a little further in your response? Is it a few meters or is it just a few inches? Because that will make a world of difference.
You will be informally consulted on the length of lines before we actually go out to formal consultation. So just watch the space.
Thank you. Councillor Michael Firminger, please. Sorry, Prue.
Sorry, I popped up again, Madam Mayor. I recognise we're more than halfway through the time and not halfway through the questions. So can I ask that we suspend 4.2.10.9 so that we can get all the questions asked and answered? Thank you.
Do we have to have a vote on that? Who's the seconder? Thank you, Stephen. Can you vote to extend this item to the consent?
So, Madam Mayor, point of order. I think it's actually 4.4.36, which gives the chair the power to extend this part of the meeting. It's at your discretion. You don't need a vote.
Sorry, Andy, I can't hear you.
Not my apologies. So it is 4.4.36, which says that the total time may be extended at the discretion of the chair, which is you. So you can just say yes.
Yes. Yes, we'll extend it. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Firminger.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for that. My question is to the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. Between 2011 and 2021, the population of Wokingham Borough grew by 15%, according to the Office of National Statistics. On that basis, don't you think Wokingham Borough needs more public litter bins, not fewer?
Thank you, Michael. There's no direct correlation or standard link between population and the number of litter bins required. However, we do have a requirement to assess where litter bins are, their usage, and if there are others that nearby which could be otherwise used. And this assessment has been undertaken as part of the current analysis. The extensive public consultation has been taken in August and good feedback has been returned, with suggestions of bins to be removed and those to keep. The analysis of that continues. Regardless of whether bins are removed through this process, our focus is to strengthen the communication to the borough to responsibly dispose of litter in conjunction with national campaigns, including Keep Britain Tidy. Additionally, ongoing support will be provided to litter picking groups and organisations, and enforcement action will be taken against those individuals who litter or fly tip. There are, of course, several new developments which, when adopted, will have public litter bins in open space areas. They will also be emptied and will have allocated commuted sums to undertake this.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. I do recognise and support the help to litter picking. But my supplementary question is this: what other areas, if any, did the council consider cutting or finding savings before it decided to cut public litter bins?
My responsibility, of course, is quite a limited part of the council's activity, so I can't answer that question in full. We have looked at my portfolio. Within my portfolio, almost everything is resident facing, and so we have had to choose very carefully.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Vance, please.
Thank you. COVID has been and gone, but the Liberal Democrats of Woking Borough Council clearly believe in allowing their employees to swap office for their lounge at home. The public sector's most important role should be delivering effective services for the taxpayer, not helping workers to have more leisure time. The public should be receiving decent services. Instead, the Liberal Democrat Council have raised council tax, cancelled bin collections, cut down on grass cutting everywhere, put up parking charges, diminished school bus services, and lost footfalls in the town centres. When will all council staff be back at their office desks, serving residents rather than enjoying a relaxed home atmosphere?
This has to be one of the most outrageous questions ever put to an executive member of this council.
Thank you. Please, will you allow the council to carry on?
For you to use the difficult financial decisions we have had to take due to the country's appalling economic situation and the historic low funding we receive from government to attack our dedicated and hard-working officers is a low point in this chamber. Your question is illogical and full of errors, but I will attempt an answer. Firstly, during the COVID-19 lockdown, the council continued to provide high-quality services to residents thanks to excellent use of IT, creative partnership working with the voluntary sector, and dedicated officers prepared to be incredibly flexible to do what was necessary for residents. Like many other organisations, we are building on this success with the development of a modern workforce strategy. This will be centred on ensuring that staff are based at the location where they can best serve our residents. The principles for this work were agreed unanimously by the Cross-Party Personnel Board in June, supported, Jackie, by your Conservative colleagues. I don't have time to go through the full benefits of these arrangements, but they include saving the council a very considerable amount of money, helping us to fight climate change by reducing unnecessary car journeys, and widening the number of highly qualified staff who can apply for our roles. If you would like to understand more about this, can I refer you to the minutes and recording of the Personnel Board on the 21st of June 2023. Your factual errors need to be corrected. We have not cancelled bin collections. We have not diminished school bus services. Our town centres are thriving. And although we've had to raise council tax because of low government funding, that's exactly what's happened every year any of us can remember under the previous Conservative administration. I'll end with an unprecedented request or perhaps offer. You have the right to a supplementary question, but I would urge you to consider using it instead to apologise for the unwarranted and utterly unsubstantiated slurs you've made against our hard-working officers.
Thank you. Councillor Vance, would you like to carry on? Ask your supplementary.
Yes, thank you. Of course, I know officers work hard at home, but the NHS says that working from home can cause stress, a lack of motivation, anxiety and uncertainty. The BBC reported in June that 81% of under 35s feared loneliness from long-term home working. What is the council doing to support staff who prefer to work in the office but find their colleagues are working from home and council offices are invariably empty, lacking the supportive social atmosphere of a busy office environment?
Thank you for your supplementary, Jackie. The council continues to support all of our officers wherever they work. A lot of our officers do find working from home very beneficial. A lot of our officers have a hybrid working environment, which enables them to balance time working at home, where they can get focused time to concentrate, with time working in the office. The modern workforce strategy will look at where we can place our officers best to best serve our residents. We will look alongside that, and the Personnel Board will be very engaged with looking at the welfare of our staff and how we can best support them.
Thank you. Councillor Croy, please.
Thank you. My question is to the member for Highways, Mr. Tony Backcall. Residents in my ward endure bad parking, which blocks roads for residents and public services alike. On the 8th of September, a bus had to reverse from that part of the London Road, which is a slip road, back onto the main A4 roundabout, as the passage was blocked by cars parked in contravention of both permanent and temporary TROs. To local residents, buses being forced to change their routes is not news anymore. It happens on a regular basis. In total, for these roads, I won't list them, but for these roads, how many parking tickets have been issued by our civil enforcement officers between the 1st of January 2023 and the 31st of August 2023?
Thank you, Andy, for your question. I'll face the Mayor, otherwise I might get told off. We understand that the frustrations that residents and public services have been facing due to the challenges posed by inconsiderate or illegal parking. I want to assure you that the Council is actively working on addressing this issue in response to the persistent parking problems. We have developed proposals to introduce additional parking restrictions in the vicinity. These proposals are part of the upcoming amendment to our parking regulations. If these proposals are approved and put in place, we will closely monitor the situation. Our aim is to ensure that these new restrictions are effective in preventing further parking violations and obstructions to the roads. We are committed to taking necessary action in the future should contraventions continue to disrupt the flow of traffic and impact the daily lives of our residents. The slip road in question already has restrictions, and for now, we will increase enforcement in the area. We encourage residents and ward members to continue reporting instances of inconsiderate and illegal parking. If actual obstruction does occur, please call 101 as it is a police matter. During the period 1st January through to the 31st of August 2023, there have been a total of 245 penalty charge notices issued to vehicles on the roads in the area. London Road Early, 132, The Drive, 55, Early Court Gardens, 48, Chiltern Crescent, 10.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you for that. And it is encouraging that some enforcement is happening, but in spite of the enforcement, the problem persists, and increasing the amount of parking restrictions in the area is not going to be enough. Whatever enforcement we are doing is not enough because people think they can park where they want, when they want, without any real sanction. So will you meet with me to actually talk about a strategy which tries to reduce this possible to the lowest possible level?
I will be very pleased to meet you on site and discuss this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul Loys, please. Abdul.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Residents have complained to me that public litter bins are full and need to be emptied more frequently, not less. Has the council considered the costly consequence of reducing the litter bins, such as increases in venom, littering, dog fouling, and flying tipping?
Thank you, Abdul. your question to a limited extent overlaps with Michael's, so you'll forgive me if there's a slight overlap in the answers. But as part of the analysis of the proposed changes to the street cleaning service, a comprehensive assessment has been undertaken to identify bins which were either full, half full or empty on a weekly basis. In addition, mapping data was used to assess where litter bins were close to others that could provide sufficient coverage. In 2018, Hertfordshire Council, along with others, took part in a research project with the Waste and Resources Action Programme, which selected some areas to remove litter bins to understand the impacts. It was discovered that the removal of bins, in fact, reduced the total level of litter across all the areas, all the trial areas, by 23.5%. Notwithstanding this, our analysis of the consultation results are being considered, and a full report will be presented to overview and scrutiny on the 2nd of October. Regardless of whether litter bins are removed, there will be a comprehensive communication campaign. We will continue to work closely with our internal and external stakeholders to mitigate potential impacts. The majority of members of the public are responsible and will not break the law, be it on littering, dogfouling or fly tipping. However, individuals that are caught undertaking these damaging activities are warned that we will prosecute and will publicise any successful actions.
Thank you. Abdul, do you have supplementary?
Yes, I do have, Madam. The Liberal Democratic administration have track record of ignoring the result of public consultation. Can the executive member guarantee that administration will listen to residents, respond to the consultation?
We are going through the results of the consultation, and I do object to this myth that your party are perpetuating, that we ignore results of consultations. We did not ignore results of consultations, for example, on the presence of a 3G pitch at Maiden Early School. We totally accepted the results of the consultation. So I'm afraid your myth doesn't stand up, but will be taking note of the results of this particular consultation.
Thank you. That's the last of the member questions. We now move on to item 50, minutes of committee meetings and ward matters. We have 20 minutes. Members, will you please indicate if you wish to ask a question? Yes, thank you. You may put your hands down now. Councillor Burgess, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. I was pleased, sorry, it's a bit of discipline in my group there. I was pleased to learn from one of our Labour town councillors actually that after our campaign, the council has agreed to put forward a proposal for the installation of a pedestrian crossing on Warren House Road in Norreys. I presented a petition on this to council in March 2022 on behalf of residents, but even though I was the petitioner, I haven't actually had a formal update. I'm sure you'll agree that petitioners and residents deserve to be kept fully apprised of these developments. So can I ask that a full update on the proposed crossing, including estimated timescales, is provided to me as the petitioner so I can update residents?
Thank you, Rachel, for your question. Sorry you haven't had a reply. Warren House Road crossing has been assessed and it has been justified, so it is on the list. I can provide you with a formal update as well, and that will give you a rough timescale. It's all going to be dependent, though, on funding. It's also going to be dependent on any new schemes that come in. As I mentioned earlier on Laura's response, there are a lot that come in every year. They all need to be assessed, and if any of those are rated higher, they will then jump over the top. So I will give you as much as I possibly can for you. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Howe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question is for the Executive Member for Leisure Services. So since 1924, the Wargrave Library has operated in the Woodcliff Hostel and been a valued part of the village. So why is it that following the efforts of the previous and current administrations to make a fairly significant investment in the Twyford Library for the benefit of the Twyford residents, there has been a decision to withdraw Wokingham Borough Council paid staff from Wargrave and a call for community volunteers to run it? How do I explain this decision that shows an inequality that's being applied to the Wargrave village community, and will he reconsider that decision?
This is actually, for me, library sits in my portfolio, Graham. Firstly, Twyford is a capital investment from Section 106 payments. So, and there's a difference obviously between the capital and the revenue payments that are for the general day-to-day running of the library. We are actually calling for volunteers for a number of our libraries to help with the running. We're in a situation, a financial situation, that makes it very, very challenging for us, and we want to do everything we can to keep these vital community services open. We're looking at alternative models, looking at community hubs, how we can bring services in together. We are starting a very big piece of work around that. In order that we can do that work and get there and look at how we can continue providing vital services in the right places, and for a way that we can afford to do it, we do need some support from the community in terms of volunteers to help us do that. And it's not exclusive to Wargrave Library. I would much rather see that we can continue having these services than having to close them down. We are very much on a journey of partnership working, and I hope you would support us in doing everything we can to keep this open. Thank you.
Councillor Rebecca Margetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to Councillor Bishwick as well, a lead member for Transport and Active Travel. Residents have contacted me as Finchampstead Road, as many of us know, can be a perilous route for cyclists wishing to travel into Wokingham by bike. With only 3 bus services a day or a long walk, the only other way to get to Wokingham is by car. I've had previous meetings with Councillor Kerr and Councillor Cornish about a safe cycling route from Finchampstead into Wokingham. We have made no progress. Please could you advise what provision is being made for active travel in communities outside Wokingham, and whether you could meet with us again to see if we can progress this further?
Thank you very much for your question. Finchampstead Road, or the route from Finchampstead to Wokingham, was included in our consultation for the LC whip. Unfortunately, there was a lot of negative feedback, and that actually has put it down in the lower part of the priority list. We will be working on this particular project to try and get it to go forward. We are reliant on capital money coming in from Active Travel England, as well as the design and any consultation, but we've got to work through the list that we've currently got. If there are ways of trying to get around it, I'd be happy to meet with yourself and other ward members to look at particular routes, but it will be some time. It's really unfortunate there was this negative feedback from a lot of people in the Finchampstead area, which then pushed this scheme further down the list.
Thank you. Councillor David Cornish, please.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for Planning. I'm very pleased that the Council this evening voted to adopt the Finch-Hampstead Neighbourhood Plan. This represents a huge amount of work by a team of community volunteers in the Parish Council and was supported by 89% of residents who voted in the referendum. While supporting development in a couple of specific locations, it would add very real and substantive extra protection to those areas of the parish most valued by the local community. And it just may be, due to a quirk of the planning system and where we are with the local plan update, it just may be that it will require WBC to demonstrate only a 3-year housing supply figure, not 5, to avoid the tilted balance being applied when assessing planning applications in the parish. This is yet to be tested. However, one omission in the plan is the extra protection which was sought for areas of countryside generally to the southwest of 9 Mile Ride. This was rejected by the independent examiner as being a strategic issue more appropriate to the borough's local plan. Could I therefore ask the Executive Member for Planning that the proposal for a strategic green gap to be created in the area south of 9 Mile Ride now be given careful consideration as part of the forthcoming local plan update?
Thank you, David. I too was concerned about the removal by the inspector of this particular requirement, and I will look further into your request.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Cunnington, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for Environment, Sport and Leisure. It's to do with 2 parks and 3 incidents in my ward and to do with dogs off of leads. We've got 2 incidents in Cantley Park recently that have been brought to my attention, one only yesterday. 3 different types of victim. One was a jogger, one was a cyclist, and one was a child. All where dogs which are off their leads don't seem to be under the control of their owner. Now, I recognise that there are some signs requiring owners to take care in these areas, but the other one was in Ashwood Meadows, which of course I recognise might not necessarily be straightforward for you. But is there a way that we could perhaps have some sort of low-cost campaign, reinforcement of the expectations of dog owners in these 2 parks, but perhaps in others too, because I believe that this could be an issue of public safety?
It's certainly something that we can look at. I suspect it's not just unique to your ward as well. I wonder if you could send me the details of the actual incident in an email, and I will make sure that our team look at it.
Madam Mayor, me again, unless Andy's going to correct me again. I think this time it is 4-2-10-9. I don't think we're going to get through all the questions in 20 minutes, so please can we extend the time so that everybody can have their question asked?
Do you have a seconder for that? Thank you. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you, that's carried. Councillor Peter Dennis, please.
This is a question for the Leader of the Council. Many of my residents of my ward are being impacted by what is termed fleecehold, whereby estate and flat management companies hold them to ransom. My residents, first of all, would like to thank the Leader of the Council for communicating to the management company, asking for it to deal with them, with the residents fairly, and that is really appreciated. However, there's still issues. While the council has no legal standing with such companies, what else can the council do to push the companies to act in a responsible and fair manner?
Thank you for your question, Pete. And if I may take this opportunity to thank you also for the work you've been doing with those leaseholders in Montague Park who have been affected by this really quite serious matter. My colleague Lindsay Lindsay Ferris, the executive member for planning and the local plan, is I know working with officers to see whether there is anything we can do within the emerging local plan that would address this problem. But I have to say, this is very clearly not a problem limited to Montague Park. It's a national problem. And because it is a national problem and not just a local problem, I undertake to write to all 4 of the borough's MPs to try and seek to get their support in lobbying government for legislative changes. I think that is an appropriate step to take given the seriousness of this problem.
Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question's for Councillor Fishwick and is around the communications on the current roadworks that are underway by SGN in Church Road and surrounding roads. Whilst SGN are responsible for the actual roadworks, the council has a responsibility to ensure that all signage is concise, meaningful and appropriate. Reading buses who were affected by this communicated the work would end on the 2nd of October. Residents had a leaflet drop from SGN saying the work would last for 32 weeks. Yellow signs appeared saying the work would last for 14 weeks. Recently, residents of Cornfield Road informed me of the yellow sign saying the junction between Cornfield Road and Church Road was closed. Absolutely the right thing to do. Unfortunately, this was positioned at that junction, which is at the end of Cornfield Road and not the entry point to that road. So residents have had to put up with drivers constantly using their driveways to turn around and go back down the road. Where is the quality control from highways on this project? Can you please look into this to ensure all signage for future roadworks is precise and appropriate?
Thank you, Keith, for your question. Traffic management is actually the responsibility of the utility company, and the inspectors from our Streetworks team inspect, and if they find there are issues with it, they can serve a defect notice. However, I will look into this and get you a response back.
Andrew Mickleborough, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Kilnsey Drive was one of a number of roads in Hawkton Ward that have recently benefited from WBC's new preventative road maintenance measures. Surface cracks have been filled and sealed, but the rejuvenation liquid that I understood would complete the maintenance was not applied. Could you please provide Hawkton residents with an explanation and update, including any impacts that not applying the rejuvenation fluid at that time might have on these roads?
Thank you, Andrew, for your question. Asphalt preventative can only be applied during the summer months. It is guaranteed for a particular period of time, which is 5 years. They will not allow any guarantees after the 31st of August, hence why it has to stop. This particular road, the first part of the preparation was undertaken, which was the sealing of the joints and some of the defects. Unfortunately, the wet weather during July and August across the area, because they don't just work for us, has delayed the programme, and therefore they only completed part of the work in that area. It's been added to next year's programme.
Thank you. Councillor Charles Margetts, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question's also for Paul, so apologies, Paul. This week saw the start of, I think, 6 sessions of drilling test holes at California Crossroads. The first session, I think, was Wednesday night. Thursday, first of all, it was some residents on the phone complaining that they'd been woken up at 3 in the morning and didn't know what was happening. It was followed then by the head teacher of 9 Mile Ride School because the contractor had left their blue site hut and all their fencing in front of the emergency gates to 9 Mile Ride School, which have signs on them saying keep clear at all times. I did raise this with Highways earlier, who did assure me the consultation letter went out, and I do accept that sometimes we can send letters to people and they may not read them or may not take that on board. However, I did press the point on the hut and the equipment and was told that these spaces had been allocated by a Highways officer. I did explain to the officer involved the problem that is caused, and he said he would look into it, but offered no commitment that next time it would be different. Could I ask that you take this up and just make sure that when the contractor is doing the next 5 sessions, they don't block access to the school?
I'm surprised they're actually blocking access to the school because the work is overnight. Oh, emergency access, yes. So for certainly the emergency access, they shouldn't be doing that at all. But the works are overnight. They're working up to around 11:30 with the noisy type works, and then it's soft dig after that. The work that was done on what we are Thursday night now, Tuesday night, I understand did go on a bit longer, and that was the very first night they were working there in area 1. Last night it was rained off because there was torrential rain. They are working tonight, but they're in a different location. They're not in area 1. They've gone into area 2, which is part of 9 Mile Ride, because some residents did contact me through David Cornish because they'd got some young children who couldn't sleep, but they were adjacent to where the works were being done, really adjacent. I'm talking about a few metres apart in the alleyway leading up to the car park. So those works are not taking place tonight. They are going to take place tomorrow night, which at least allows the children to sleep overnight, and a reserve night of next Friday, so they won't be disturbed during school times. But I'll certainly feed back about the emergency access because they shouldn't be blocking that. Thank you.
Councillor Adrian Mather, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services, David Hare. Woking Borough Council have recently purchased the Berkshire Care Home in Evidence Ward. Please can you inform us why we have done this and what are the benefits to Woking Council?
Thank you for the question, Adrian. We've done this basically so that we can control the market and so that we can provide good, effective and reasonable service to the people who need it, especially those with dementia. We want to concentrate obviously on dementia because that is a growing need in this area. The fact that we can charge a reasonable rate and not have money going out of the charge to the people who provide for the service, the people in the background, is very important because we can make sure that people get a good service while also getting a service which is effective and reasonable. And that is how we will work with people. We're not going to have massive charges to pay in the way. And so we will work with people in that way. I think that the home, it is at the moment, it needs improvement, but we have a plan to improve it. We already are putting into operation some of the necessary work to improve it in the build and things like that. And so we will go forward. And I think it will be a great asset to the authority when we see this in a year or two's time, blooming and being a great place to go.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Executive Member for the Environment. Would you join me in encouraging more of the good work that this council's been doing with the Friends of Southlake? They've been helping do lots of good work in nature areas in my ward. I relaunched the Friends of Southlake at the beginning of this year, and the countryside team have been doing good work with them. And this is totally the type of work that the council should be doing, working with the community to improve the local area, getting people out and about in the natural world. So would you please encourage more of this work across the borough, and indeed thank the countryside team for their work, and indeed the Friends of Southlake?
Clearly, we will do everything that we can to make a positive impact on our residents, whatever part of the borough they're in.
Councillor Jordan Montgomery, please.
Thank you kindly, Madam Mayor. My question, sorry, Paul, is also to the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Earlier in June, resurfacing works were carried out on a stretch of 9 Mile Ride adjacent to the entrance of Johnson & Johnson. This was very much welcomed by residents of the ward who had been requesting said works for a long while. Unfortunately, not long after, emergency works had to be carried out on this section of the road due to a burst water main. Residents have been complaining about the state of the road following these works, particularly regarding a jarring bump that differs in colour from the rest of the tarmac. However, I understand these works were only intended to be temporary in nature due to it being an emergency, and that a more permanent fix would be carried out at a later date. Please could you provide further information on when such remedial works will be conducted to improve the situation?
Thank you, Jordan, for your question. Yes, 9 Mile Ride, it had its resurfacing done, and then unfortunately there was a burst water main near Johnson & Johnson. The water company has reinstated, but it is a temporary fix at the present time. The inspectors from WBC Streetworks team have been to have a look at it. It is not dangerous. However, the water company have been contacted to see when they are going to be giving a permanent reinstatement, and they will be doing that very shortly. I haven't got a date from them, but it's going to be soon.
Councillor Peter Harper, please. Okay. Councillor Mike Smith, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In Maiden Early, adjacent to the railway station, there's an ageing concrete footbridge crossing both the railway and the motorway that has been discussed in council on many occasions. The previous administration's promises have been for a very expensive replacement that would have cut right across the early town council cemetery, destroying the tranquility of the important place. May I continue? Cutting right across the early town council cemetery, destroying the tranquility of this important place of rest and contemplation. It would have also led to the loss of virtually all of the parking spaces at the station and significant loss of mature and ancient woodland on the Woodley side. Quite an environmental nightmare. I understand that review by officers and yourself, Paul, some while ago led to a revised outline plans that indicate it can be both safely and cost effectively repaired to extend the life. Please may I have an update on progress for the residents?
Thank you, Mike, for your question. Yes, essentially it is now going to be a repair and refurbishment of the bridge. We don't need to go for the total replacement as originally was proposed.
Paul, can I stop you?
Thank you. Understanding Order 4.2.13.16, response by officers. Could I have an officer please confirm that when this was discussed in the working groups where we had with Andy Glencross, etc., that actually I asked the council to repair the bridge rather than replacing it to avoid both the cost and the disruption.
Thank you. Okay. Would you like to carry on, Paul, please?
I'd like an answer, please.
We will come back with an answer, Pauline. We don't have it right now. Councillor Smith, you're standing.
I was also present at one of those working group meetings, and repair was said to be impossible at that time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, 4.2.13%. That proves that I asked for it. So that is incorrect, what you said.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to carry on?
And I would like an apology.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is a meeting to be held next week on the 27th of September, and that will finalise the discussions on the work that has been done to date, and will then provide the next steps. That will also include potential work with Network Rail, because we'll need track access to go across any works that we do across the railway. And I can update you next week after that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay, please.
There were a number of works done on the Reading Road recently to treat the Reading Road in Winnish, and we'd like to know how long is this less expensive treatment going to last on the roads?
I assume, Madam Mayor, that question was aimed at me. The asphalt preventative maintenance work which has been undertaken between Showcase Roundabout and Winnish Crossroads has a guarantee of 5 years. The actual cost of those particular types of work compared to full resurfacing costs around 15 times more. So with this preventative type work, we could do an awful lot more preventative maintenance than just resurfacing it, which would be very isolated in one particular location. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abdul Loys, this is our final question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure which lead member is going to be answering this question. I've been asked by a proposed mobile phone mast, which is going to be put outside Loddonvale doctor surgeries. And this is what manager has written to me. I am very concerned at this proposal to put up 20-meter phone mast right outside the practice surgery. This is terrible. Please do something about it. Can I ask whoever the lead member for that, please, if we can remove, this is a practice which is a lot of people use, and I'll be very pleased if you can do something about it. Thank you.
This would be aimed at me, but this would be a planning application issue, and you as ward member.
Please, could you use the microphone?
I have got it on.
Oh, yeah, you need to face it.
Speak into it, sorry. Abdul, this is a planning application.
You can't move it either.
Abdul, this is a planning application aspect, and if it's in your ward, then you have right to raise it and make a point to the planning officers involved, and if necessary, list the item to be taken into account. That's the proper route, and this is the major route. I can't comment on a particular application.
Really?
Yes, it really is. I just want to correct Councillor Ferris, because it's a telecommunications, it cannot go and be listed. I've tried, and planning officers have said no, because it's a pre-application.
Yes, you are right. It is a you're right. It is a pre-application, but it doesn't stop you doing it, because I've managed to stop one in before I was. Yeah. No.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we move on to item 51? Statements by the leader and executive members, and we have 20 minutes for this. Please, will you indicate if you wish to speak? You have 5 minutes each. Thank you. Stephen, you first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've heard already, the council is planning to vacate its Shoot End headquarters as part of its effort to save money in these challenging times. It's only right and proper that when we are having to make savings, the council's estate should make a contribution. Though many of us are emotionally attached to it, and I have to say I'm one of those people. I've spent many happy hours in this council chamber. This building is far too expensive to run in our current circumstances. Jackie might care to note that thanks to modern flexible working practices, especially working part of the week from home, a building of this size is no longer needed. We can therefore save the council taxpayer money by moving to smaller accommodation that is cheaper to run. Associated with this move away from the idea of a big central headquarters is a community hub model. And we are exploring this at present to see whether we can decentralize the way the council interacts with our community. This would bring the council and its services into the main communities of the borough. So I wanted to update colleagues on that and explain why vacating Shoot End is the right thing to do.
Thank you. Sarah Kerr, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to update on 3 parts of my portfolio. Firstly, the website went live in July. The previous one was built on old technology, it's end of life, and it caused many frustrations for residents. This is just the beginning of the development. We've launched what's known as minimum viable product. It's already improving user satisfaction and making services more visible to vulnerable residents. The new site is also more accessible, particularly for people with disabilities. And we're going to continue to develop and improve the site based on data and feedback. Enhancing digital services like our website benefits all residents and saves time by preventing avoidable problems. This enables us to focus on helping those who can't use digital services or need a more personal, non-digital approach. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank the officers who've worked so hard. This has been a really tough job to do, and they've done an exceptional job. So thank you very much. I'd also like to just highlight some progress in the domestic abuse part of my portfolio. The statutory duties that we have for domestic abuse are actually quite narrow, and the majority of victim survivors we support actually don't fall under those statutory duties, but it's obviously morally the right thing that we do. And we also do a lot of work in preventative stuff as well, and many of you will be aware of the Council's Home Refuge Service. Something else I wanted to mention is that we now have put domestic abuse specialists sitting in different parts of the council, including in the housing team, children's services and adult services. Domestic abuse is often hidden, many victim survivors themselves not recognising that they are suffering abuse from a perpetrator, and it's often difficult for those in professions such as social care to identify that there is abuse. We've listened to feedback and recognised that having independent domestic violence advisors, IDVAs, as part of these teams is crucial to ensure that the domestic abuse lens is applied, protecting and providing support in the right places, and not allowing the abuse to continue or get worse. Finally, I wanted to provide the news that we have got confirmation now from National Grid and Scottish and Southern Electric Network that we can proceed to our original timeline on the Barkham Solar Farm. This has been a monumental effort. There were about 1,300 projects in the country that were in the situation we were in. We are one of just 10 that have been given the green light to go ahead. The transmission issue has been rectified. I'd like to thank, firstly, Bouygues, who are our contractor, who have been absolutely brilliant throughout this, being patient, providing support and working with us to help on this issue. And we're just in conversations about getting them remobilised again once we've got the final details and that contract variation. I'd like to thank SSEN and National Grid as well. We've been holding tripartite discussions with them, and they've been incredibly helpful. I'd just like to pass on my thanks to them. Most importantly, though, I want to give officers my heartfelt thanks. And many officers have been involved, but actually 2 in this room. We've had our CEO and Deputy Chief Exec involved in these discussions, and the work that's gone into this. To be in that position, to be at the forefront of these changes that we're seeing in the grid and what's happening has come from the hard work that you've put in, the lobbying that's gone on. It's just been phenomenal. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Prue-Bray, please.
Thank you. I'm sorry that the officers didn't get a clap from the Conservatives there. I think they would have deserved one. So I think you all know that at the end of August, the Executive approved new home to school transport policy that will apply from September 2024. And I'm very grateful to the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to officers and to my fellow exec members for the work they put into the formulation of the new policy. There is one aspect of that new policy that I would like to draw your attention to this evening, because it hasn't had much of an airing, and I think it needs one, not least because without some form of explanation, it risks being misunderstood. And this is about how the policy deals with low-income families. Where a child is eligible for free school meals, or if a parent with whom they live receives maximum working tax credit, the rules for eligibility for free transport are slightly more generous than for other children. However, there will still be children who do not meet the criteria for free transport, but who attend a school further away than the maximum walking distance. And usually this is because their parents have chosen the school. In the past, the council's offering for these children has been a discount on the full cost of a fare pair place on a school bus. That offer was not written into the wording of the policy itself, but did appear on the application form for a fare pair place. We will no longer be explicitly offering that discount. So before you all start expressing shock and horror, this is not because we want to make life more difficult for families who are struggling. I would ask you to note that a discount on a fare pair place is no good to anyone who lives in an area of the borough where there is no council operated bus that runs to your school, which is quite a lot of the borough, or where there are not enough places left on school buses for all the people who want them, as is the case in Shinfield this year. To give you some idea of how many people actually use this discount, it was fewer than 1% of the children registered for free school meals. I would also point out that the discount we offered has in the past made the cost just a little bit cheaper than a Reading bus's bus pass, but that a fare pair place only entitles the child to get to school and back for the official start and end of the school day on that specific bus, whereas a bus pass is much more flexible. And finally, if a family is actually struggling with the cost of transport, the likelihood is that they are going to be struggling financially in other ways, and an offer of a discount on a fare pair place, even if one is available, may not really be the answer. So what are we doing instead? And the answer is looking at it differently. Where a child is not entitled to free transport, but is on free school meals, or a parent they live with is on maximum working tax credit, we will look at directing them to sources of wider help if they request it. We also have the right to exercise discretion with regard to transport. This is written very clearly into the policy now. This is not, I'm not making a promise that we will provide transport for people who are not eligible for it. But what I am doing is making a statement that we will consider the circumstances of every individual child and what is in their best interest, and do our best to help in a more holistic way than we have done to up till now.
Thank you, Prue. Imogen.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought it was about time that I gave you all an update on our current financial situation. All councils are finding their finances are being subjected to significant unprecedented inflation, and we particularly receive inadequate levels of grant funding from central government. Like everyone else, we are dealing with escalating costs, but particularly in providing support for an increasing number of vulnerable adults and children. Councils across the country are having to make unpopular decisions, as we are doing, just to keep going. And I wonder how long it will take before this government actually acknowledges the crisis that our public service are having, which certainly includes local government. Here in Wokingham Borough, we receive just over £400 less for an average household per year in our government grant than other similar councils. Just think about that for a minute in terms of how much council tax we each pay. Our council tax is capped, and I certainly would not want to suggest rising it above that level, and it would disproportionately affect those less able to pay. The government grant also does not factor in the reality of high cost of living in Wokingham Borough, which makes the cost of our council services higher too. Essentially, the government's method of calculating this grant has created a grossly unfair deal for our residents, and we need a better deal. So, since the Lib Dems took control of our council finances, we have been working hard with our officers to reduce outgoings and to match our shrinking real terms income. We have also had to find funding to cover the holes in the budget left by the previous administration. One other clear difference since the change of control is our external borrowing, which is now significantly under better control and much more manageable. We are using more of our residents' money to pay for what we need rather than paying interest on external loans. Wokingham Town Centre regeneration cost over 150 million to build. It's not making anywhere near the amounts we were promised when the regeneration started under the Conservatives. However, it currently has a manageable debt of now 95 million, and we are making around 2 million per year after interest payments. We also have the investment properties in our community infrastructure fund. This fund sadly has decreased in value by nearly £9 million since the properties were purchased under the previous administration again. We are currently reviewing the losses, but the portfolio as a whole is still generating nearly £4 million per year in rental income for the council. Going forward, the Lib Dems intend to only add to this portfolio if there is a property of community value to our residents within the borough. Our recent care home acquisition is part of this and will serve the residents while reducing our overall care costs. Moving on to our treasury management, it has been publicly reported that we loaned 10 million to Woking Borough Council, and it is certainly not a bad thing. We have actually loaned money to 4 different councils this year, and it's a very common practice amongst councils to lend each other funds, and it has been routinely happening here without incident for more than 20 years. These investments were agreed by all councillors on this council as part of our treasury management strategy in February council meeting. These loans will bring in over £1 million of interest by the middle of next year and will help us plug our revenue deficit. If you haven't realised, investing in councils is not the same as investing in most businesses, or indeed Icelandic banks, as the previous administration found out. This is because councils provide statutory services and are underwritten by central government using Public Works Loan Board for loans. And even when a council as broken as Woking with over £2 billion of debt caused by the Conservative administration, their existing contracts and financial commitments will be paid. Because no council has ever defaulted on its loans, and it is a factor which makes local authorities one of the safest places for us to invest Woking Borough Council's money. The only risk would be if central government as a whole were to go bankrupt, which with our current state of leadership is more of a possibility than I would like to think. In the Woking example, we were getting 10 million with the 10 million returned in March with an addition of £350,000 worth of interest. I cannot think of a bank that would offer that rate of return for a 9-month loan. Much of this money is part of ring-fence SIL money and grants that are waiting for projects to start, but it makes far more financial sense to make this work for us in the meantime, and it is a good example of treasury management. With all that is said, we should not underestimate the size of the challenge of financial deficit we have. We are additionally inviting residents to take part in our forthcoming budget engagement survey, where they can help us shape how the council makes decisions to save taxpayers' money. In all that we are doing, we are committed to ensuring that there is minimal impact on our frontline services, and we are prioritising protecting those who need our help the most. It is for this journey we have our officers to thank and all the hard work they've put into this every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We now come to item 52, statements from council-owned companies. Please indicate if you wish to speak. Is that all? Yeah. Thank you, Stephen.
I'm not sure I'm entirely flattered by your saying, is that all? But,
no,
anyway,
Stephen, I don't quite mean
that. I hope you didn't. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on the council-owned companies. And of course, I'm going to focus on the housing companies. And I want to start bringing council's attention to the fact that the appointment of David Cornish as a non-executive director of Loddon Homes and Wokingham Borough Council Holdings has been formally approved by their boards. And David will make an excellent addition to these boards. He brings business experience. His ward is one that has a great deal of social housing in it. He is going to be ideally placed, I think, to help these boards as we move forward. So I warmly want to welcome David. I also want to draw council's attention to the increasing integration and close working between the council's different housing companies. We're working quite hard to ensure that the companies are approaching the task of delivering social housing in a more integrated way. That hasn't always been the case in the past, and we want to try and improve the working together. And I also want to inform Council that we recently received a report on how the companies could operate more effectively in the future. And I want to report further to Council at a future meeting on the changes we'll be introducing in the light of the comments made in the report, the recommendations made in the report, which are, I have to say, quite far-reaching and quite fundamental in the way in which we might structure our use of these local authority housing companies in the future. So when I'm in a better position to give you some detailed feedback on this, I will do so. But I want to give you some early warning that this is coming down the line. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to update Council on that matter.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Standing orders say that we're not allowed to start motions after 10:45.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. It's actually 4.2.8.1, which was brought in with the support of the Conservatives a year or two ago, just for your information. That's the ban on the 15-minute start.
Are you trying to wind me up, Andy? Good night, good folk. It's the end of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Have a safe journey home.